The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Thursday. We're already in May 3rd. I don't know where the time goes, but I'm excited to be here. I hope that, and everybody here is excited. We're all excited to be with you on this Thursday. We're going to be with you live for the next 3 hours. There's a little bit of a silly vibe going on in here. I'm feeling a little silly, so it should be an interesting show today. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier, when you're live, there are always going to be things that have the potential to go wrong, right? That's one of the exciting things about being live. And we will tell you from time to time that if something goes haywire, I always refer to it as having gremlins in the studio. And our wonderful technical director, who is very creative, has joked for quite a while that she was going to create some gremlin graphics. And so Emily let it fly. We're going to be attacked by gremlins for just a second, and there you see. So again, and then there's a second one too of what the gremlins are doing to our mechanical. There we have it, the gremlins. So we have to applaud Emily Goodwin, our fabulous technical director, who's been hard at work on the gremlins and always is hard at work taking care of the gremlins. So next time I talk to you about we have gremlins in the studio, you'll get a wonderful visual. Isn't that a fabulous thing? But we are going to be with you for the next 3 hours through the sillies, talking about autism and how we can be more effective. I can't even talk today because it's so silly. More effective, more efficient working with our children on the autism spectrum. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a practitioner, I know that there's somebody in your life that you care deeply about, that you want to help them. You want to be a part of their team and help them to reach their full potential, whatever that is, because we know for all of our kids it's something different, right? There's no cookie cutter. It's so frustrating sometimes in the media when they talk about autism and people get an idea in their head, oh, it's Rain Man, or oh, it's Temple Grandin, or oh, the fact is that all of our kids, all of our students, everyone, whether it's a client that you're working with, they're all different. There is no cookie cutter. And they all deserve the very best that we can give them. And there are a lot of things that we can do. And I always like to bring you what the possibilities are, because that's what gets me excited. You know that we talk a lot about ABA here if you're watching the show. ABA is Applied Behavior Analysis. It's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism, so we do talk about that a lot. And I want you to know that the reason why is because it's such a broad field and because all of our kids are different and they need something different, and there are a wide variety of techniques that are involved in ABA, so it's worth talking about a lot. Because whether you have a child who's very high functioning and just needs a little bit of support, maybe they're struggling with making friends and you want to do better with that, ABA can help you to do that. If you've got a child who's very profoundly affected and is not able to even have functional communication skills, you're not even looking at toilet training yet because you're dealing with so much challenging behavior, there's stuff that ABA can help you with, and everything in between. We know that if we use the principles of ABA, we can work to diminish challenging behavior and increase behaviors that we want to see, including learning, taking on new skills. So that's what's possible. So we will talk about ABA a lot. It's not the only thing we talk about, though, because we talk about what it's like for us, what it's like for our kids, how we can spread the word, how we can get the funding to make these things possible, and so many other things. so many other things. We only have 3 hours a day, but thank goodness we have that 5 days a week. I want to remind you that even as we're talking about ABA, and I love to talk about ABA, I am not an expert in ABA. I am not a behavior analyst. I'm not a BCBA by any stretch of the imagination. So I do want you to know that. I'm hosting the show, but I want to be the conduit for you to the experts who do know more about those things. My place in this puzzle is that I'm a mom of a young man who's about to be 9. I can't even believe that. I can't even believe that. But he was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. And as I said, he's about to be 9. He's in completely neurotypical 3rd grade. Right now, he's sitting in his seat in his classroom that he's fully included. And he's taken the STAR test right now with absolutely no support and rocking it, I assure you. And that is miraculous. That is amazing, and I can tell you that when he was 2, that is not what they were telling me he was going to be doing this week. Quite the contrary, and I can smile about that now and know differently. It was a rough journey, but it was one that I will always be, I'm going to get emotional. I will always be grateful for, and I can tell you from the very depths of my being that I could not have found my way on this journey had it not been for a whole lot of help. Parents and practitioners and experts who pointed me in the right direction. And one parent in particular who said to me, showed me her child. And when I said, "What are you doing? This is what I want for my child." And she said, "We're doing ABA. And here's the phone number you need to call." And it was the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And as they say, the rest is history. But I got my child back because of ABA. So I'm pretty passionate about it. And when I said to that mom, and I've said it to her 1,000 times now, I've said, how am I ever going to repay you? And her answer from the beginning, and it's still that, is, well, you're going to pay it forward. So that's what I'm here to do, is to pay it forward in whatever way that I can. So if you write in, call in, tell me what you need, then I'm your conduit to go out and find the person who's going to be able to answer you. I am definitely seeing that it takes me a little bit of time. Sometimes you guys write in with some things that they're awesome questions, and it takes me a little while to track it down and find exactly the right person. So you will have to be slightly patient with me, but I want to find you the answers that are going to help you on your journey. That's how I want to pay it forward. And so there are lots of different ways that you can get a hold of us. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, then you will see that across the top of your screen it says either live or rebroadcast. If it says live, there's a box there that says your questions. You can type in right now and hit enter. It sends the message directly here to me on my screen, and we can be talking in real time, which is pretty fabulous. If you're watching when it says rebroadcast, and I know that's a lot of you, you can still participate. There are many ways to participate, but one of my favorites is by email. If you email us your question, you can send it immediately right now, whatever time it is for you. We will get it and talk about it on the next available show, and we'll also send you a typewritten response. In fact, sometimes we will send the typewritten response from the expert that we asked to get the answer. So that's a pretty cool thing. And there, you can also phone us. I want you to know that if it's live and you phone in and you agree, we'll patch you right into the studio and we can be talking just like on the phone, right? But if it's not during live hours, someone will be there to answer your phone call, or you can leave a message. You can also Skype during live hours. We're going to be Skyping with somebody later on today, and I know we're Skyping with somebody tomorrow. And if you'd like for it to be you, it can be. And if you have picture capability, we can even put your picture up next to mine and be having a conversation in that way. So that's a wonderful thing. Feel free to Skype in with us. Many of you are participating on Facebook, and I just love that, because not only do we get to talk to you, but other people get to support you as well. And hey, that we know that's important, right? That you have a strong support group of people who tell you that you're going to survive this, because you are, but heaven knows we have to be reminded of that on a regular basis, right? Don't feel bad about that. You need it. So please participate on Facebook. You can also tweet. I know some of you who are really into the Twitter thing. I'm working on it. I'm going to tweet college on a daily basis here, but I'm not expert at it yet. You guys can help me out. But if you want to tweet, you can be, and we can be having a conversation in that way. Also want to remind you that there are many different ways that you could be watching the show. You don't have to just watch it live on autism-live.com, which, by the way, after we air the live show, repeats will air consecutively. But if you want to go to blip.tv, you can go there. We have our own little channel there, and you can go and see past episodes. You can look it up by day and say, I want to watch Tuesday's show because I know that Shannon had Vince Redmond on and that they were talking about how to handle all the different emotional things and the fact that you and your spouse are on a different page. I want to watch that. Well, that was Tuesday. You can go and look up Tuesday's date. You can fast forward through everything else because you say, really, I'm not into all the other stuff. My feelings aren't going to be hurt by that. I really want to watch the Vince Redmond. You can fast forward. You can pause when your child's in the middle of something. Therapy ends. Pause it. Come back to it later on when you want to. So that's on bliptv.com. If you have less time, but you still want to be watching it and searching topics, you can go on YouTube, and we have some of the longer clips there as well, but some of the shorter ones too, the highlights, the interviews. If you just want to catch Vince Redmond, you can go there and watch that. If you want to watch the interviews that we had right now, yesterday we played the interviews with Ed Asner and Gary Cole and Holly Robinson Pete. Those are all up on YouTube. Excuse me. And as well, you can also, it's a free download on iTunes, which is a wonderful thing. And I know more and more of you are participating on iTunes. You can subscribe if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. You can be downloading whole episodes there and fast forwarding through it as well there. And very shortly, I know I keep promising, but it's coming. When the gremlins are gone, right, we're going to have the audio portion of the show so that if you want, there's the gremlin. Hi, gremlin. We got to name them now because they're two separate ones. So it's like maybe we need to get a third one and have them be Larry, Moe, and Curly. I don't know. We'll work on that. If you're there. That's Curly. Clearly that is Curly. But if you are interested in listening in your car or listening while you walk, I know sometimes you have different constraints. If you're better than me and you're having an opportunity to exercise and get on the treadmill and you want something to listen to, very shortly we're going to have the audio-only portion available on iTunes. Again, all for free. Hey, if there's a different way that you would like to be watching us that you're not seeing, the Blip TV came about because people asked. So if there's a different way that would be really sweet for you to be able to watch, let us know, because we're here to serve you. And if we know what you need and what you want and what isn't working for you, I'm just going to guess that we'll be more likely to be successful in helping you. So, and that's really what we want. So help us out and tell us. Don't sit there and say, geez, I just wish they were doing this. Let us know. Okay, we like to start every single morning with something we refer to as the jargon of the day. This journey through autism is so jargon intensive that it can wear us down to a nub, right? There's so many things to be exhausted about, but I find that where I am the least patient is when somebody starts saying something that has to do with my child, by the way, and I don't understand a word they're saying. And in the beginning, it all sounds like Greek, does it not? Although I think that's a disservice to Greek. Because Greek actually, I think, makes more sense sometimes. But we have to make friends with the jargon. There's a silly vibe in here today. It might be good, might be bad. We'll see. You'll let us know. But in any case, we have to make friends with it. We have to start to get some of these terms under our belt so that we're not constantly having to stop in the middle of a meeting and saying, I don't know what you just said. Can you please explain it to me? Or sometimes what's worse is that you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to make an idiot of myself and ask them what they just said. I'll make a little note and I'll look it up later on, and then you go to look it up and you can't find a definition that you understand. It's one that's full of jargon, so you go and look it up someplace else. Or worse, it isn't there. You Google it and nothing comes up at all, and you go, what am I going to do now? We want to be the most effective members on our children's team that we can be, right? Whether we're the parent, the teacher, the practitioner, I don't think there's a single one of us who's interested in being the weakest member on the team. So making friends with the jargon, a really big part of it, and then eventually we'll turn to the dark side and start using these terms as if everybody in the world understands them. Just this last week, I was talking about my son's IEP and telling people, oh, I had all this stuff to do this week, and not the least of which was Jem's IEP. And finally, and I just kept saying IEP, 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 until finally a friend said, honey, you said that like 8 times, and I have no idea what you're talking about. And I hugged her and said, bless you, thank you for reminding me, because I just assume now that everybody knows that it stands for Individualized Education Plan. But why? Why would we know until we're here? But once we are here, we got to know. Okay, and this week we've been talking about school a lot, so our anagram for today is SLP. And you will see this turn up on your IEP, and it will be something that people will talk about, and they'll email to you if you're getting any kind of an education email from school, and they'll say, well, the SLP said this, and you go, I'm sorry, who is that? Well, when we demystify it, it makes it much clearer. It's the speech and language pathologist. And for those of you who are brand new to this journey, at some point, usually your child, we always have the actual definition and then take it down. Usually your child in an IEP, if they have an autism diagnosis, is going to be, as part of your offer of FAPE, which that was our word the other day, free appropriate public education, which is what your child has a right to legally in the United States. Usually there will be an offer of OT. I know, it gets intensive, right? Which is occupational therapy. We talked about that yesterday. And almost always there will be an SLP assigned to your child, at least for an assessment phase, to make sure that they're not behind. If your child is not behind in speech and language, then they won't include that in your offer of FAPE. But if your child actually has a diagnosis of autism, very likely your child is behind in speech and language. So the speech and language pathologist will be assigned to your case, and they will make an offer of FAPE telling you how many hours is appropriate for your child. They will come up with specific goals for your child for the school year, which you'll agree to or not agree to, and you can add to them, add to those goals. And a lot of people don't know that you can, but you can say, well, here's what we'd like to make a goal. It has to be a realistic, attainable goal, right? You don't want to set the bar so high that you're not going to meet it. It has to be something that's realistic. But the speech and language, the SLP will help you to, they might say, I just don't think that's attainable in this year. What I'd rather work on is this, or that's not age appropriate even for a child who isn't on the spectrum. But in any case, you will, in your FAPE offer, you will be given a certain number of hours per week to work on those specific goals. How do you figure out what goals you might want to add to an IEP meeting to request that they be included in your child's IEP? That's a really difficult thing. But I will tell you, I mention this frequently on the show, that I am at home. My son had 5 years of ABA, intensive ABA, from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. He graduated last summer. He's been done for almost a year. But there are still things to be worked on, right? And I work on those in Skills, which is a wonderful program, and you'll see some information about that throughout the show. But that's what I use, and there's a wonderful thing in Skills that once you've done the assessment and you're working on different lessons with your child at home, you'll notice that with each lesson there's an IEP benchmark that comes with it. And it's already in the language, and you just have to fill in some blanks to take them in to give IEP goals. It's a fabulous thing, so you don't have to guess. It's already appropriate to your child. It's very specific to your child, not cookie cutter. They're the actual things, and you can tell, having done the assessment, which kinds of things your child should be working on and which things are already age appropriate. It's not going to give you something that isn't age appropriate. It's very slick. I like it a lot. Because I used to be a teacher, and so I know about standards, and I know about looking at, and I would go online and look up all the different standards that were supposed to happen during the school year, and I would try to figure out, well, where is my child versus where I want them to be, and and I would be putting together this whole craziness, hours and hours and hours that I spent. I think it was just because I needed something to do, and then I would go in, and my son's IEP team is superlative, and especially our speech and language pathologist is Whoa! Oh, fabulous woman. Those are my angels singing. But anyway, so I would have done all this work and I would come in and she would sit there and have all the goals already sorted out and already have it in IEP language. And I would go, what am I doing? What am I doing? But for some of you who don't have that fabulous team, unfortunately, and I hope that's few of you, but if you don't, or if you just want to be adding something to it, or you see, okay, well, you know, they've done this, this, and this, but you know, on my list there was also this other thing, and you can ask to have it put in. Occasionally that would happen with me. With all of that research I would do, there would be one thing, and I would say, you know, I'd also like to be working on this, and they would go, oh, what a great idea, we'd love to, because you know, nobody can think of everything, right? And they were all too happy to put it in to IEP language for me, but now I have skills to do that for me. Okay, so the SLP, if your child has classic autism, going to be really important. If your child has PDD-NOS, it may or may not be, depending on where your child's strengths are, but it's very possible because the SLP not only is going to work on, you know, creating sound, but they're going to work on syntax, social language, things of that sort. So you may still need to have an SLP on your case if you have PDD-NOS. And the same is true for Asperger's. It's more of an uphill battle with Asperger's to get services, but you can go in and request an SLP and say, I need for my child to be working on social language, because so often that is the case with children with Asperger's, and it tends to get overlooked. But you can argue for that. My son has this wonderful thing in his school day that it's called Lunch Bunch. And I don't know that they do it at every school, but I think they should be doing it at every school. Once a week, he has this with his SLP, because he still does get speech and language as part of his school day, but it's done during lunch, and they make it a social time, but they condense, you know, normally he's in the lunchroom and there's so many children and it's such a sensory nightmare. But on Fridays, he sits down and they hand pick 5 kids, and they cycle in and out of them to see who does well, and they eat their lunch, and they will give them topics to talk about during lunch that my son has to participate, and they are there to sort of facilitate, but they really hang back and let this group of kids talk, and kind of monitor, and then we'll give my son some skills outside of that to work on and some suggestions so that he can keep the conversation going. And then they play a game together for the rest of the time instead of being out on the playground, and it's always a game that encourages language and language skills. And we have seen so much growth through that Lunch Bunch, and that is done through school. I know a lot of us, we have Ellen Garcia come in and talk from time to time about some of the new social skills groups that they've started here, which are phenomenal. But this is part of my son's school day. It's once a week, and the SLP is there and facilitates and takes notes to be able to help him and prompt him for things that come up later on. But we've seen a lot of progress socially from doing that. And social language, hard to separate from language. So if your school's not doing that, you know, you can talk to them about it. And I can give you more information about that if you're interested. Just write in and tell me. Okay, we always have a question of the day, too. And we've been talking to you this week about what do you wish your school had? What's your biggest, you know, problem with getting your IEP finished and signed, all of those things. But now we got to flip it to the other side, right? Because for every bad thing, there's something good, right? And we want to know, what do you really appreciate about your child's school? For me, this list is endless. There's so many things that I appreciate about his school, but since we're talking about the SLP, I just have somebody who is absolutely superlative, who bends over backwards. Every single year that we have had her, she shows such an interest, and I know it's not just my child. She's somebody who really, really wants to help our kids. She actually created, and I keep saying to her, you have to publish them, but she has something called Mortimer Mouth, and it's a little character, and so the kids will come in, whether it's for their individual or when they do group sessions together, they do a little Mortimer Mouth warm-up, and it's this whole thing about how, and there's pictures of Mortimer Mouth and him doing things with his tongue, so that he does this warm-up to get his tongue moving and his lips moving. It's just so stinking clever. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. If my son does something particularly wonderful, this last week I got an email from her saying that Lunch Bunch had gone particularly well and telling me something that my son had said in particular. She just goes above and beyond. And I hope that you all have somebody like that in your lives, because I just so appreciate. And I sent her back an email and I said, you have no idea how much I appreciate you. And I know that's true because I really appreciate her. And her name is Andrea Worrell, and she is just a fabulous, fabulous SLP. And again, just one of the many things at my school, but the one that comes to mind today, because she does a really awesome job and so caring. She's so patient with the kids too. Okay, but I'd love to hear from you. What do you particularly appreciate about your child's school? You can write in on Facebook, you can tweet us, you can do a specific shout out to somebody. If there's a teacher that you want to thank, you can put it on the Facebook and then send the link to them so that they know. It's a way of reinforcing them and let them know that you really think they're doing a superlative job. So I think I will send a link to this to my son's speech teacher because she's really amazing. And I hope she publishes her Mortimer Mouth. It's fabulous. Okay, so we also always have a topic of the day. And of course, our topic this week continues to be autism in the school. We know it's a big part of our kids' day. It's a big part of their lives. It's a big part of our lives. We all want our children to reach their fullest potential. And at some point we're told, well, you got to send them off to school or you have to make other arrangements at home. It's a big portion of their lives. And when our children can learn, and they can learn in a really healthy environment, it's exciting to everybody. It's exciting to a good teacher. It's exciting to a good SLP. It's exciting to a parent. And it's exciting to the children. I love to watch my son's face when he gets something and he gets excited about it. And that's a remarkable thing. But I have to say, and as his mom, I'm extra excited when it's him. But when I see any child, when you see that thinking happening and they make the connection, really, really exciting. So we're talking about autism in the school. We're talking about what it is like some of the times, and some of the times it's not where it needs to be, right? We're talking about what we can do as parents, teachers, and practitioners to set our kids up for success, to set our teachers up for success, to set our aides up for success, because that's an important part of this equation. So we'll continue to talk about that with all of the different things that we talk about. So some of the things that we're going to be chatting about in particular today, we're going to touch on generalization briefly. We're going to touch on another myth of the day. And what's fabulous to me is that our special guest, because it's Thursday, we try to do interviews on every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 o'clock. Soo Cho is going to be with us at 11 o'clock. She's going to be Skyping in, because if you've seen Soo Cho on the show before, she is one of our world travelers. She goes all around the world, helping families, training their team, setting up their programs for them. She's part of that workshop model where she travels to the far ends of the earth. So hard to get her in the studio, but she's going to be Skyping in with us. And in particular, we're going to be talking about teaching functional communication skills, how and where to begin, and talking about manding and tacting and interverbals. And if you don't know what those jargon terms are, that's okay. We've covered them before on the show, but we'll be talking about those with Soo Cho. It's like the speech and language day here at Autism Live. So pretty exciting and really important for being able to access the curriculum, the full curriculum at school. But beyond that, when we have functional communication, we're happier. And that's certainly true for our kids too, that we see that when they have functional communication skills, challenging behaviors decrease. Gotta love that, right? So let's take a break. We'll try to shake out some of our sillies, and we're coming back with a tip on compliance. So stick with us.
I am grateful for Autism Speaks because they allow families like me to have hope.
They're working towards having these children live better lives.
There's a space for you. Yeah, there's a world for you, and there's a community that is behind you.
And one that has really been able to be the singular voice for people who are involved with and who care about autism.
I do have autism, but I don't let that become a disability for me. Autism Speaks is going to continue to help those who need it, and just look at all the stuff they've done so far and you will be impressed.
3, 2, 1.
And you need to support the walks. We have to raise awareness, but we also have to raise funds to do the work.
I'm grateful for Autism Speaks for one main reason, is they are allowing me to focus on the research.
The work that Autism Speaks has been doing is critical for keeping autism research on the radar screen.
We proclaimed 2 April as the World Autism Awareness Day. I'm very proud of the UN and thankful Autism Speaks.
Getting the health mandate bill passed in New Jersey particularly, we needed to be able to make an argument, not just do this because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's cost effective.
When everyone else told me nothing was wrong with my son, I got information from a website that told me something wasn't right.
I am so proud of Autism Speaks for creating these beautiful ad campaigns, which have reached people who are not affected by autism and have also created a greater climate of compassion and understanding.
It's been really great for Bachman to have gotten involved with Autism Speaks early on. I think everybody here feels like they really make a difference.
To make sure that we generate as much money as we can for Autism Speaks so we can all solve this puzzle together.
There's no way we could have come this far without our families, without our supporters to date, but there's so much farther we have to go. And everybody's invited to join this cause. We need all the help we can get to make the difference we know we can make.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and it's time for a compliance tip. You guys know that I love to talk about compliance because when you have compliance, everything is better, right? And when you don't have compliance, everything is miserable. So we want to be working on compliance with our children, but we want to work on it in an efficient and effective way, right? And there are some times when it's not appropriate to be targeting compliance, right? If we want to be setting ourselves up for success, and if we want to be following the principles of ABA, number one principle that I'm always reminding you of with ABA is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, and we want compliance to be maintained, right? We want it to be a regular part of our day. Don't we all fantasize about having the child that you say, you know, go get your shoes, and your child goes and gets your shoes and you don't have to say it 3 and 4 times, or get into a tussle, or have to get them up and take them over to pick up their shoes, or even worse, you know, because it can go bonkers from there, right? And end up in a tantrum and a meltdown, right? So we fantasize about that child that we say, go get your shoes, and that not only your child runs and does it, but that your child is happy to do it, right? Oh, I know. That seems like it can't be possible, even with kids who aren't on the spectrum, right? But not only is it possible, it's incredibly easy to do if we hit the right things, and it's possible to do with our kids on the spectrum. I know, you're looking at me going, what you talking about, Willis, right? But we can. We absolutely can if we work on it in the right way. In order for any behavior to be maintained, principle number 1, it has to be reinforcing. So instead of getting into that tussle, instead of getting into an argument about it, instead of talking till we're blue in the face, right? Isn't that something we say? I've asked you till I'm blue in the face, right? Not helpful. We don't want to have to do that, but what we want to do is set up the circumstances where over and over and over our child sees that by being compliant with the first time, being that first time listener, they get reinforced for it. That all of the lights come on and the party happens when they're compliant. So we have to do a little bit of work, and we have to be ready to reinforce like crazy in the beginning, but it's time well spent. But we also have to pick our times. It is not a good time to work on compliance when we are not prepared and that we're not ready to reinforce, or if we're overtired or over emotional, right? And we've all been there, have we not? Where we just go, and I love Evelyn Gould comes in on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock and talks about this, that some days are yes days and some days are no days. And we're not gonna take compliance on a day when it's a personal no for us. If you're already exhausted and you haven't eaten and you're feeling all kinds of things and you've got other stuff going on, don't take compliance on in that moment. In that moment, you want to get through as easily as you can, because we're not going to ask our children to do things that we can't be consistent with the consequences. And if we're not even in a place where we could reward, then it is not the time to work on it. Likewise, when our children are tired and our children are, they've had a rough time, or they haven't eaten, or they've just come from having a whole lot of demands put on them, this is not the time to work on compliance. Maybe eventually it is, because we want our children to be compliant, and even in those circumstances, but when we're starting out working on compliance, we're going to make sure that everybody's in a good page. And if you're saying to, I could just hear you right now saying, well, Shannon, when is that going to happen, right? Maybe it ends up being the first thing in the morning after breakfast has happened. Or if you see a moment in which you have a happy moment, that's a good time to start working on compliance. And one of the things that we talk about always with compliance is if you can't get there, because first rule of working on compliance is that we want to catch them doing something good. If you can catch the child doing something and immediately praise them and say, oh, that was so good what you just did, usually that's a great moment to work on compliance. And I know some of you are like, I don't know, we're in such a difficult place that I can't catch my child doing something good. Then ask them to do something you already know they want to do. So if your child has been saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, and you go and you get them something and they take a bite out of it, right before they go to take a bite out of it, say, take a bite out of this, I want you to take a bite out of it, they take the bite, and you say, hey, that was really good listening, I loved it when you listened to what, and they're going, well, I wanted to do it anyway, right? That's okay. That's okay, because now you've started reinforcing, and we always want for compliance to start with a moment where they get reinforced for something instead of where we've nagged or scolded or, and I always admit to you that this is my go-to. When something, and you can ask my husband, he'll be honest with you, something happens, I always want to, that thing on the Peanuts when the teacher goes, wop, 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 right? This is me. I always want to say, well, you didn't quite do that right. You need to do it, and I know it's not effective, but it's like it's this genetic thing that I can't help myself. My son's been talking to me a lot about, he heard that the parable of the dog that is about to cross the stream, and the scorpion comes to the dog and says, can you give me a ride across the stream? And the dog says, no, you're going to sting me. And the scorpion says, no, I promise I won't sting you. And so the dog says, all right, I'll give you a ride. The scorpion gets on, rides across to the other side, and then the scorpion stings the dog, and the dog says, why did you do that? And the scorpion says, well, it's in my nature. And we have this dog that we adopted that's driving us crazy. And my son keeps saying to me, well, Mom, but it's in her nature to chew the couch. And it's in her nature to bark at other dogs. And, and I know he's right. Well, it's in my nature to nag. And I'm trying to get rid of it because it's not effective. And I want to be effective. And I also don't want for my husband and my child, when they see me coming, to go, oh no, right? That's not what I want out of life. And still, I start to say it. Not effective. We are not ever, I'm asking you if this is true, we are not ever going to be able to nag somebody into compliance, right? It doesn't work. You've probably been trying it too. It just doesn't work. But there are all kinds of statistics that show us that we can reinforce someone into being compliant. We absolutely can do that. I encourage you, in a little while we're going to watch the A Word. I encourage you to go back and watch the early episodes of the A Word where they start compliance training with Jack Riley with something as simple as come here. And even as I say that, you know, when my child wasn't coming, when I said come here, there was nothing simple about it, right? But you can see how they reinforce and prompt to get Jack Riley to do that on a regular basis. But again, picking the time and making sure that the emotions are in a place for all the participants before we start working on that. Otherwise, we're not setting ourselves up for success. We talk from time to time about establishing operations and motivating operations, that if there's something else that's going on, we want it to be something that makes us more likely to succeed, not less likely to succeed. I can't say S words today. So if we're overtired, we're less likely to be successful, right? Doesn't mean we can't be, but we're less likely to be. If our child is overtired, they're less likely to be successful, right? So that's an establishing operation or a motivating operation. We want to make sure that those things are going for us. And when we need to turn things around, you might be in a place where your child's been working on compliance and you've been having it for a while, but you're in a situation where you need your child to be compliant right now, whether it's for safety or for whatever reason that you might be in public and you need the child to be compliant and you're like, Shannon, I know what you said about don't work on it when we're overtired, but this is perhaps life and death or just something that's really, really important. Well, the best thing to do in those circumstances is to very quickly remind the child how worthwhile reinforcement is. So find something to get the child to immediately respond to that's easy for them to do. It could be, if your child can make eye contact, ask them to make eye contact, say, that was the best eye contact. Now I need you to do whatever it is that you're going to do. This was something, by the way, that we worked on very early in kindergarten with Jem because they were having disaster drills in the school. And I had said, I don't know how are we going to be sure that my child is going to be compliant. But they built in that they would ask him to be compliant with something else, reinforce him for it, and it literally takes a second. And if eye contact is difficult for your child to make, you can say, look at my finger. They look at your finger and you go, good job. Okay, now we're going to do this. And the child is much more likely to be compliant. So picking your times and your moments, that's when it's an emergency, but otherwise, pick the time in the moment when you're rested, everybody's in good spirits, you're going to be much more likely to be able to get it done. Reinforce them for something, catch them doing good. That's a great way to start working on compliance. And if you can't find something good, ask them to do something that they already want to do. Compliance is possible for all of our kids. Look, they want reinforcement too, as long as it's something that's actually reinforcing to them, and they are willing to be compliant for it. I know it's maddening sometimes to parents because I remember my child, I was like, he's not going to do it no matter what. And the therapist came in and very quickly had him being compliant, and I went, oh, okay, well, and I beat myself up a little bit about it, but then I went, no, I'm just not using the tools. There are tools, we can do it. By the way, lovely compliance, all the lesson plan, and all the teaching points and skills. But it is something that we'll continue to talk about here, but you can access the whole thing in skills. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about generalization, which is so important to all of us. And if you don't know why, you're not going to want to miss it. Stick with us.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
there's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all. But if he does talk, he will only be able to, you know, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover. And Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now. And lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. I want to remind you that if you're watching the show in a rebroadcast or any of the other different places that you can watch it, that you still have the ability to ask your questions about anything that we talk about. We'll flash the email address for you. You can always email us, but there's other ways of getting a hold of us as well, Facebook and Twitter and all those things. But there's the email address. Write to us your questions, your comments, your concerns, your suggestions, and we'll not only write back to you, but we'll also cover it on the next available live show. So we hope that you'll do that. Right now, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about generalization. And I promised you before the break, I said, if you don't know why generalization should be important to you, then make sure you stick around. Generalization is what we're always planning for in quality ABA therapy. If, you know, parents will ask me all the time about ABA and they'll say, is it all the same? No, it's not all created equal. And one of the great hallmarks of a really quality ABA program is if we're planning for generalization from the very first moment. Generalization is when our children take a skill that we've been teaching very specifically and start to apply it to other situations and other places at other times and with other things around them. So anything that you teach, and I always like to go back to the toileting example because this is one where we really understand. If we're teaching toileting, we don't want to just teach our child to be able to use the toilet in our bathroom, right? And what we see sometimes is that a parent will write in and say, you know, my child is capable of using the toilet at home and we don't have a problem and it's very quick and efficient and fabulous and we love that about our lives, but if we go on a trip, or if we're out and we're, you know, visiting people or we're at a store, at an amusement park or something else, suddenly my child can't, you know, and there are a whole host of issues that they'll talk about that, you know, my child, it takes them a half an hour to be able to pee in the toilet, or worse, a child who literally will not poop for days unless they're at home, right? It's not a circumstance that we want to create. Right? You know, if you're so happy the child is using the toilet, they're pooping in the toilet, woohoo, you're not having to buy the pull-ups anymore, it's wonderful. And then to realize, oh no, my child doesn't feel comfortable pooping anyplace else, and suddenly your life shrinks back. You can't go on a trip, you can't go visit anybody, you got to be able to plan to be home. What happens? And it's detrimental to the child. You can become ill if you're not able to poop on a regular basis, right? For those of you who your child struggles with it on any given day, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So when we're teaching anything, whether it's toilet training or anything else, we have to plan from the beginning for this skill to be generalized, to be able to be used wherever. And the way that we're going to do that is by not teaching it in just one circumstance. So for generalization, for toileting, we're going to start using the toilet at home, but we don't want to wait a long period of time before we have the opportunity to use another toilet. Right? Now, are we going to go around and teach the child how to use every single toilet in the world? That's not possible, right? But we're going to plan from the beginning, and in the plan we should be saying, okay, we're working on toilet. The first 2 days we're going to stay home. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to clear the decks. We're not going to be anyplace else but home, and we're going to work on toileting. But very quickly it should be part of the plan for the child to need to do it someplace else, whether that's grandma's house or your best friend's house, you know, but another really friendly environment that you can take some time, where you're not going to be kicked out or they're going to send the manager in and say, what are you doing in here? You know, other people need to use this restroom. You're going to pick something that's really friendly, and that you can kind of control some of the variables. And once you have it there, then you're going to take it to another place where you can control the variables, and eventually you're going to make sure that it happens at a grocery store. I know it's not even anybody's favorite place to do that, but we don't want to leave that for 6 months down the road, because we know that sometimes our children, they'll get something within one circumstance, and if we don't give them plenty of opportunities to see that this applies in all these circumstances, they're going to get inflexible about it. So there's my example for toileting, but it could be absolutely anything. All the skills that we teach, we want to plan for that generalization to begin with. It's one of the reasons why I say to you, if you're working with a team at home and you're doing this on your own, and bless you if you are, because you're amazing, and I know that you can do it, but it's not easy. But there has to be more than one person on the team, because otherwise the child is going to get used to responding to you when you ask these questions and ask them to do something, and they won't be responding to somebody else. Even now, there are times when I don't know why, but my son assumes, and he's doing so well, but he assumes that people aren't talking to him, especially adults. I don't know why, but it's something we continue to work on. And usually I'll have to point it out to him. So if I ask him a question, he's attuned to listening to me, and he knows that I talk to him. But if there's we walk someplace and we're someplace and there's another adult who walks up and says, he knows if they say, "Hi, Jem, how are you?" then he responds to them. But if they just ask a question and they don't direct it at him, he sometimes misses a cue and doesn't know that they're talking to him. And I have to say to him, "They just asked you a question." And then he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, what did you ask me?" Right? But he's less in tune to them. So, there are times that I can certainly say to him, "When's your birthday?" And he's going to answer me, but somebody else says, "When's your birthday?" And it doesn't occur to him that they're asking to him. Well, I have to work on that and make sure so that he's not missing all those cues. And you never want to have a circumstance where you're teaching, for instance, personal knowledge to your child and saying, "What's your name?" And they say, "Well, my name is Francis, whatever," right? But then the teacher at school says, "What's your name?" And the child doesn't know how to respond because they've only learned how to respond to one person. We never want that. So we have to be planning to have different people offer the lessons, at least 2 people, and my preference is that you have at least 3 people on your team, if it's possible. But that we are changing our stimuli so that when we're teaching something, whether we're teaching what a rhinoceros is, that we're not showing the same picture of a rhinoceros over and over and over again, that we have different pictures of rhinoceros, and we have a little 3D toy figure that's a rhinoceros, and then we show a video of a rhinoceros so that the child gets the global understanding of, okay, that's a rhinoceros. So that then what we see happens is that down the road, maybe we're teaching giraffe and we show a picture of a giraffe, but then the child is watching a video and says, "Giraffe," and points and gets it, because they're learning, oh, well, it's not just a picture of something when we're looking at animals, that, it can be a cartoon or it could be a real thing, or now I'm at the zoo and I know it's a giraffe, right? So we're planning from generalization from the very beginning. Anytime you're going to teach anything to your child, you want to make sure that you're mixing things up on a regular basis, not to mess them up, that it's very planned and purposeful, but that you're letting them see that this thing that you're teaching exists in many different formats, that it exists at different times of the day, that it exists with different people, and it looks different in different circumstances, that red isn't always this color red, right? And what happens when your child first begins to generalize is that then it's like the floodgates open and your child starts to generalize a whole bunch of stuff. And you'll see your child, you'll have been in a situation for maybe several months where your child will be taking on new skills, but they're hard won, right? That you've been working on something and the whole team's been working on something and your child gets it and you go, oh, this is amazing, right? But you're used to seeing, well, we were working on that and now it's there. That's great. When you make the leap to generalization, all of a sudden these skills will pop up and you go, where did it come from? Where did it come from? And you can't pinpoint and go, they'll just start to learn and they become little sponges. It's a very exciting time, but you must plan for it from the beginning. If you're working with an ABA provider and you're not hearing those kinds of conversations about how are we planning for generalization or how are we using different stimuli or how is this therapist saying it in a different way than this therapist is, you need to ask some questions and or move, because you don't want a child who learns things by rote. Now, if you're in the circumstances where, for instance, the toileting that you didn't know, so you didn't plan for generalization, stop beating yourself up, you didn't know. We can go back and clean those things up, but it takes time and you have to be patient. If your child is not able to poop anywhere else but home, I think it's something that you really want to look at targeting. Pick the appropriate moment and the appropriate time, just like you did with toileting. Almost all of us that did toileting, we cleared the decks for at least a couple of days. So you got to do that again. You got to clear the deck for a couple of days. And now you know your child can already poop at home, so we're not going to start there. Maybe it's time to go for a weekend and visit somebody's house. They're going to be away on a trip so that it's just you guys and you don't have to deal with other variables. Or you go to somebody's house where it's, if grandma lives by herself and she's up for this, and you're going to keep it fairly quiet and you're going to build in reinforcements just like you did the first time. And you'll start small in that circumstance, but this time you're going to be aware that we're not just going to do it at grandma's house. We're going to reinforce like crazy when the child poops at grandma's house, but then within a couple of days, we're going to go and do it at Aunt Beth's house. And then a couple of days later, we're going to go back to grandma's house and do it, and we're going to reinforce like the dickens until eventually we're going to go to the department store and we're going to reinforce. And you might want to scope out those bathrooms beforehand so that if there's something sensory that particularly is going to make your child be uncomfortable, that you minimize it as much as possible. You're going to have to get creative, but it's doable, right? But how much nicer if we plan from the beginning and hit that from the beginning. It opens doors for our children. It's so worth it. Generalization is where it's at. Plan for it early. Okay, let's take a break. Oh, we're not going to take a break. What am I saying? We're going to look at the A word. And this is the amazing documentary that's being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. They're following a little boy who was diagnosed with autism a little after the age of 2. He's almost 3 now. And what I love about this is we get to see the arc of ABA therapy, that you're going to learn a skill, and that's great, and there's progress, and then you're going to hit a new issue that needs to be dealt with. And then you have to work on that. It's very typical, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because there's development that's happening. So new problems are going to crop up, and Jack Riley has started to bite. But let's take a look at how they're going to target this. They're going to look at it, see what the function of the behavior is, what are the consequences for it, and they're going to start to mix up, do some antecedent modification, do some consequence modification. Take a look and we'll talk about it when we come back.
Put your shirt on.
Oh, really? Whoa, whoa.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Oh. So I got an email from Miriam saying...
Jessica received an email from the other therapist that Jack Riley has been attempting to bite them. So she's checking in with Mike and Cheryl to see what's going on.
Has he tried to bite you guys?
He bit me. He got her.
On Tuesday morning. He bit me good. Was it just out of... Oh, it was aggression. Was there a consequence? I snapped at him and he cried. Kind of unexpected too.
Yeah.
Or and he doesn't bite out of aggression. He never did that before.
It's this sort of this week. New.
Yeah, the girls have been telling me like just about every session he's
Yeah, Mary tried to bite her hand because he didn't want to walk.
Yeah.
And so we took him out again yesterday. And it didn't start out well, but I think it ended up okay. Which his reward was if he would walk to the count of 20, he could jump with mommy and daddy. We would have him jump. And that seemed to be enough of a reward for him to try to keep going without going limp or trying to bite.
5 jumps and then take 20 steps.
So would it be okay if we went for a walk about like 9:30?
Sure.
No.
Okay, 9:45.
I'm just kidding.
Hey, what's your name? And how old are you?
2.
When's your birthday?
That's a beach.
Oh, cool. That's soon. Are you worried about the biting?
A little bit. Because I know a lot of our kids do it to get a reaction or to do it just, out of protest that they don't want to do something. I just don't want it to become an issue and become a behavior where he'll generalize it to everybody else, like his family, therapists. So far, it doesn't sound like it's been happening a lot. I just wanted to do it today just to see what the antecedent is and why he's doing it. Is it because he wants an extra minute of play, or he doesn't want to, transition from outside inside yet? Just to see what's actually going on.
No, stop.
Stay with mommy though. Nope.
Hold my hand.
Stay with mommy first.
Hold my hand.
No, settle, dude.
You want to go to count to 20? Should we count to 20? And then you get Little Mermaid, or do you want to play? Okay, count to 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20! Yay! Come here, we'll walk. Yay! Let's walk. Stand up. Oops. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
What do you want?
No.
Hello, tantrum.
Stand up.
What do you want? Tell me. I want. Okay, then let's walk for 20 steps
20
and then you
steps,
can
and then
get
you can
mermaid.
have her.
Okay, let's
Ready?
go.
Usually I just let him go free because he's been in therapy all day. So that's part of he expects to be able to just run.
I would suggest just to get his compliance under control first. You give him an instruction, he complies, you give him his little freedom. Because I know he wants to run around. Give him words to use, like, give me 1 more minute, or, I want more grass.
Yeah. Jack.
What's on you?
Come here.
Come here. Oh, good boy! Yay! There you go!
Good job, buddy.
Yay! Now what do you want? You want pancakes?
Mermaid.
Mermaid!
Mermaid.
Yeah, mermaid.
Hey, Jack, here's the mermaid.
She's gonna tickle you. She's gonna kiss you. I don't want him to feel that every time he's out there, he has to have a fight with you guys.
And quite frankly, I had no idea how to combat it the last couple of days. I thought, okay, I'll just pick him up and take him in because I had no idea what to do. And today he had a good time. I think he got out some energy.
Well, if you guys can establish or be consistent about the rules outside, like, when I ask you to come here, you gotta come here.
I mean, if he's just not behaving, if he's not doing anything we ask, is it okay to pick him up and say, okay, we're going in? I don't know what to do. I mean, I get so frustrated. I think, well, the only option I have is, we're going in. And he won't go in with me, so I pick him up. I can't do when he's 10, of course. Now it's like his main
Weapon is just to lay
weapon
down.
is to just lay down.
My suggestion would be to ask him to come here, but just, give him hugs or say what's up and then have him run again. So that when you finally do give him the instruction, he's not, too upset about it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you ask him to come here, he'll put up a fight because he knows that means I gotta go now.
So if every now and then he comes here and just
Gives you a hug, gives you a kiss.
Gets to be free, then it won't be such a bad association.
Yes.
It was a nice experience. And, the last couple times have been seriously to where I didn't even want to take him outside again. Just so traumatic.
You want the Little Mermaid?
Little
Mermaids?
Mermaids?
You should go. Oh, here you go.
No mermaids.
Here you go.
No.
Down.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, go show Susie the Little
Oh my
Mermaid.
goodness, yeah.
Shirt. Yeah, you are wearing a shirt.
I'll be right back.
You'll be right back.
I'll be
right back.
Oh, yeah, that's too fun.
Love this documentary. So let's talk about some of the things, and we've talked about this week, about there's that moment, the dad, he's saying this is happening and why is this happening and I'm frustrated, and then they go outside so that the therapist can see the behavior after she's asked a bunch of questions. You're really seeing part of an FBA happening there where she's asking the questions. Well, when is the biting happening? We've talked before about how when you see a challenging behavior that you put 2 lines on a piece of paper so that you've got 3 columns. The first column is for the antecedent, what happened before the behavior. The middle column is for the behavior, what it actually looked like, how long it lasted, who was it directed at, all of those things, talking specifically about the behavior. And the third column is for the consequences. It's the A, B, C of the behavior. And so the therapist is asking, so what happened before? What happened right before the biting? And they're talking about, well, the biting happens outside, and, and he's not listening, he's not being compliant. And, what does the behavior look like? Oh, well, he bit mom, and he bit mom on the arm, and he tried to bite somebody else. He tried to bite the therapist. Okay, what are the consequences for it? So the therapist is figuring all that out, hearing what it sounds like, interviewing. She already interviewed the other therapist, and she interviewed mom and dad to get their impressions, right? But then she says, well, it sounds like it's happening outside. Let's take it outside. Let's take a look at it, right? Let's try to create the circumstances in which, and again, this is something that you do with a BCBA, somebody who's trained, because you don't want to make it worse, right? So they take it outside, and they're doing the thing, and she gets to see the behavior, and she gets to see a bit of the tantrum, too, that happens as a result. And it's interesting, the difference between mom's reaction and dad's reaction, right? And I can't say this enough, how amazing it is that mom and dad are allowing us to see this, right? Because who amongst us has not had a moment that you've gone, oh, that was not my favorite parenting moment. And I certainly have, there have been times, even now, where, I'm here and I'm talking to you, and I always say I'm not an expert, right? But still, I'm here and talking to you, and there are times when I'll go home and I'll go, oh, I'm so glad that there was no camera here watching that, because everyone would laugh at me and say, what are you doing? And do you know nothing about ABA? That was a winning moment, right? So we're all gonna do that. We've all done it, and we're gonna do it. And I will tell you, you gotta forgive yourself right now, because you're gonna continue to make mistakes, seriously. And I love when I talk to the BCBAs here that they're aware of it too. Not only that you're gonna make mistakes, but that they're gonna make mistakes. And I love when they talk about, oh, something will happen with my child who's completely neurotypical at home, and I'm trained and an expert, and in that moment I responded and did not respond in the way that I wished I had. We're humans. We are humans, and we have moments that are better than other moments, right? And I love the fact that this family is allowing us to look in. So I got to say, the bravery, the courage for them to do that. And that I am in no way judging dad because he didn't have the best moment here. But if we're hoping to be the most efficient, most effective that we can be on our children's team, then what a wonderful opportunity to look at the difference between how mom reacted and how dad reacted. And I'm going to guess that within the next week after this happened, that the roles were reversed, and at some point the mom didn't do her highest ABA parenting self, and that the dad did rise to the occasion, okay? So that little disclaimer, because that's how real life is. But in this moment that we've caught on tape, the behavior starts to happen, and dad goes, oh, well, there it is. There's the behavior. There it is. This is the thing I'm really frustrated with. oh man, and we feel and we can really relate to all the emotion that's coming where he's going, my child is biting. And why is this happening? And I don't want this to happen because I can't have a child reach his fullest potential if he's going to bite to communicate. And he's been learning how to mand and he's been learning functional communication skills. Why is this happening now? And of course, I'm really overreacting and overacting what the dad's doing because the dad just went, oh, there it is, right? But that's what the emotion underneath is. And we have all been there, have we not? And if you haven't yet, trust me, it's coming, right? And I'm sure that mom is feeling the same thing too. She's pretty pregnant now at this point in the series. I'm sure she's probably thinking to herself, man, I just would like to run home and lay down and maybe eat some chocolate and have everybody leave me alone, right? But she keeps the mask on and does not show that to anybody, which is something we have to work on when we're working on ABA, that we allow ourselves to have the emotion inside. I love Evelyn Gould talks about making room for the emotion inside, but that we're not going to display it to the child because there's a potential to reinforce the behavior by giving it attention. Right? If the child is biting to get attention and we go, why are you doing that? Well, they got the attention. But imagine if the child is doing it to escape, which it appears that he is doing it for escape because he wants to play on the grass. And if he doesn't bite, he's going to be walked away from the grass. And in that moment that we go, why are you doing that? The child hasn't moved. So they kind of won. Right? So lots of different ways that this can reinforce this behavior. So the mom keeps that emotional divorce going. She pulls her hand, doesn't let go of his hand, but pulls the hands away so that his mouth doesn't reach, right? So he can't get the bite in. She waits a second and then says to him, do you want to do the 20 steps that she knows he already wants to do? He found that really reinforcing yesterday. And she says to him, do you want to do that? He says, yes. Well, in order to do that, he has to hold hands with mom. So he's going to get something that he wants even more than the grass. So she gained compliance in that moment. She asked him to do something he already wanted to do. And so the tantrum stops and she starts walking with him, and now he's back to being the compliant child, and the biting isn't happening in this moment. Does that mean the biting is gone forever? No. But then when they get back to the house, the therapist says, okay, we need to give him a replacement behavior to do when it is that he's wanting more of the grass time. So when you got his hand and you're walking away and he really wants to stay and play on the grass, that we're going to teach him to say more grass or 1 minute or whatever it is that the child asks for to be able to stay and play on the grass. And when he does ask for that, we're going to honor it for a period of time so that that's going to be the thing that, if the biting doesn't get it done, and we're never, ever going to let him bite and get what he wants. So that if he were to bite, the walking would happen immediately. But we want to, as much as possible, do that antecedent modification where we don't allow the bite. We're going to block it or create something else, or even try to say to him when we're walking, do you want to do the 20 steps and say it before he bites, right? But sometimes it's not going to work out, and then we're going to block it. But in the event that he ever does get the bite, he does not get the grass time then, because that would be reinforcing it, right? So, and they go through that. Now you see that mom's like, okay, this is the way that we're going to do that. And dad is still in the emotion of it. You and I are going to be that way sometimes too. I love that he is so open and letting us see and relate. There was a couple of episodes back when he said, in the interview, he said, there are times when you guys come in here and it's so wonderful and my child is learning and I appreciate it so much, but there are times that we've been struggling with something for months and trying to figure it out, and we're intelligent people. We couldn't figure it out. You guys come in and you go, well, just do this. And he goes, and it sounds so simple, you make it sound so easy, it sounds so stupid that it's frustrating. And then I want to go, no, that's not going to work. But my higher self, as the person who wants to help my child, says, all right, we'll try it, but it's not going to work, right? And then I try it and I get so mad because it worked. And it's so silly that it worked and that I didn't know to try that 6 months ago. Well, oh my gosh. I have not yet met this dad, but when I do meet him, I want to hug him and say, thank you. Thank you for putting into words what so many of us feel. Because if it's that easy, then why didn't it occur to me? And I'll tell you why it didn't. Because we were busy being parents, and we were busy advocating for our children, and we were busy pacing the floor and not getting sleep, and because we didn't have these tools at our disposal. We didn't know. We didn't know. And yeah, sometimes it is, I call it the duh moments when, and the example that he was talking about, they were having such trouble getting Jack Riley to eat. And they said, okay, what does he love the most? Well, he loves to watch videos, loves to watch cartoons and videos. So they set up the computer right by his high chair. And when he took a bite, they would turn the video on for a minute, and then it would turn off. And then he would take another bite and they would turn the video on. And when they explained this to the dad, he was like, well, that's not gonna work. That's just too simple and that's not gonna work. And they tried it and of course it did work. Right? You know, and you go, you mean I could have done this 6 months ago? And my child could have been eating and I've been losing stomach lining over this? Now, that intervention had to be morphed and changed so that because you don't want this child to go off to college and have to put a video on to have them eat, right? But that was just the first step of it. But I appreciate this dad putting into words what so many of us feel. The frustration, even as your child is getting better, that doesn't mean the frustration goes away. So I encourage you to watch all of these episodes from the beginning. You're going to see some really good therapy happening, some good examples of how to teach some of the things that we talk here, but you're also going to see the emotion that comes with it. I just love it. It's the A word. Okay, we have to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to cover some of your viewer responses from today and yesterday, because we didn't get to them yesterday. So if you want to write in for the question of the day, now is the time to do it. Today's question of the day was, what do you really appreciate about your child's school? I know for some of you, you're going to say nothing. That's okay. Vent. We vented the last couple of days, but for some of you, there's something to be grateful about, and we need to get our grateful on whenever we can, right? So stick with us. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what we appreciate at our child's school.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provide you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and every day when we have time, I'd like to take a few minutes to look at the question of the day and talk about some of your responses that you guys have written in particular on Facebook. And we've been talking about autism in the school this week, and I think this is just such a great jumping point for all of us to be able to share what's working with people who don't have anything working, and to be able to vent sometimes to say, you know, things aren't working for me today. I think it's important to language it that way because things will get better over time, usually. So, but I love how you guys talk to each other. So some of the different responses, our question of the day today was, what do you appreciate about your child's school? And somebody wrote in and said, our son has been going to school for about 6 months. The school is a great school, but the teachers are absolutely awesome. And we need to hear that, don't we? That sometimes they are. In a short period of time, our son has met many, many milestones, and we couldn't be any happier. And I'm so happy for you. I know that's not everybody's case, as we'll see going forward, but it's nice to know that it's possible, doesn't it? You know, because if you're stuck with a situation with a school where nobody is being helpful to you, sometimes it can feel like it's everyone, right? And you worry, if I move my child out of this school, how do I know it's going to be any better, right? I don't think we should ever accept less than, but sometimes it feels scary, like, oh, it could be even worse, right? But there are good teachers that are out there. There's great schools that are out there. Okay, another person writes and says, an amazing case manager who comes up with strategies that assist my son with learning and behavior, as well as bringing in ideas for goals and accommodations for his IEP. I think this is known as heaven. How wonderful is that? And she specifically cites Mrs. Colding at Waitman Middle School is a gem. Mrs. Colding, you rock. So I think that that's fabulous. Okay, another person, I love this, she writes in and says, my son's teacher loves him. And you go, oh, that's so wonderful. And then she puts in parentheses, I homeschool. Love that. And I'll bet his teacher does love him. Okay, I love this one. This is a great tip that I think a lot of us don't have. They take the time to write up what has happened during the day every day in a book that goes back and forth between us, and I appreciate that a lot. Man, that's wonderful. I'll bet you do appreciate that. Wouldn't some of us really like to have that? And you know, you could ask for that. For those of you who don't have it. I always meet my child's teacher at the gate and say, how did today go? And I've got his little sticker chart so that I can see if something was wrong at a specific time of the day. But, you know, I don't get to know everything anymore, and I'm I'm getting along with that. But when he was younger, especially, I wanted to know what happened. Another person says that his school is very understandable of his autism and the things that he does but doesn't mean to do, which is so appreciated, isn't it? Another person who says, my daughter's principal is awesome. Love that. Another one, my son's caseworker has been working with him since kindergarten. He is now in 4th grade, mainstreamed with an aide in his class. I love his aide because she puts up with good and bad days. And she is an awesome aide that he has. That's wonderful. Another person says that what she appreciates about her school, listen to this, that they pay for ABA and full-time aid from our agency. Woo! I want to know which lawyer you had. And then we get to the flip side, right? The next person says nothing. I appreciate nothing about our school. We are on a waiting list for schools that will meet his needs. So for now, he is in public schools. He has been switched from one special ed class to the next. I feel that no one gets him. That's a horrible place to be in, and my heart goes out to you. What I hear, though, is that you're working on it, that you're on a waiting list, and that I know that what's great about that is that you're a parent who's staying on top of it. This too shall pass, right? Another person who says their kindness and caring, the fact that a few of the teachers live there, live with their own angels, that live with their own angels, so can so understand what we go through. That's a wonderful thing. And I want to cover some of what you guys said yesterday on this same site. What was the hardest part of getting your child's IEP completed? And I hope that for some of you, the teachers and school people that are watching, that you listen, because this is where the stress comes, right? Ensuring that he gets his one-on-one, especially in these tough economic times, that can be the hardest thing, isn't it? Another person who says, my sister has had people from the team walk out of the IEP meeting because they had too much to do. Rude. I hope you're using a tape recorder in your IEPs, because people can't just walk out. They have to be excused. And if somebody is walking out of an IEP meeting and saying, I'm sorry, I have too much to do to be here, and that's on the tape recorder, oh, that's just ugly. That's just ugly. And you know what you do when that happens? You go, woohoo, because they just made it possible for you to get more things in your IEP that you probably weren't going to get, because that's bad behavior. And nobody wants that bad behavior made public. So I know sometimes you're in the IEP meeting and something happens and you go, oh no, they didn't. Oh no, and you get mad and you're in that place. And I've learned over the years, that's when you go, thank you for making a mistake, because now my child is going to get what is actually appropriate. How wonderful. Appreciate you so much for making a mistake. But that only happens when you've got the tape recorder. Always ask for that tape recorder at least 48 hours in advance in writing. You can send an email. Another person who says, getting the services needed for my grandsons took 2 years to get a much needed program for them. Only when we supplied data from at-home services did the school system even listen to our concerns. Yeah, it's a really tough thing, and because there's so little money and everybody's got so many economic problems, it really falls to us to advocate for our children in the best possible way. That's part of being a great team member for our children, is keeping the data and showing up with it and saying, when you've got the data, if you've been doing something at home and it's working, and you come in with the data and you say, okay, here's the data that we have, that what we're doing at home is working. Can we see your data at school to see that the method that you're doing that is not this is working? Because I understand that you have a legal responsibility to offer me a free, appropriate public education, and appropriate means it's effective. So can we see your data? Have we been meeting the, there isn't any? Oh, well then perhaps we want to switch to what I'm doing. Again, if the tape recorder is whirring, it may still take 2 years, but eventually you get there. I know, nobody wants to take 2 years, but I'm telling you, cross your T's, dot your I's, have your data, show up, know what FAPE is, and great things can happen. Okay, so another person says, timing. He ended EI, early intervention, on 4/17, had to begin pre-K immediately at 3 years. don't know your child and I don't know what your child needs, but I hear frustration in that sentence. And if you do not feel that pre-K is appropriate, I just want to let you know that as a parent, I was told that my son had to start pre-K at 3, and I, in my mother's gut, did not feel that that was what was appropriate for my child, and I fought, and I got very, very lucky, although I fought very hard, and my child ended up having 40 hours of ABA in the home funded for that entire first year. And if there's one thing that I can point to that I did right, because I made a lot of mistakes, you guys. I made a lot of mistakes, things that I wish I'd known, could go back and do over. But the one thing that I did that year was I followed my gut and I fought and I dug my heels in and said, this is happening. I will find a way. You do not want to fight me on this. They did. But my son got his 40-hour program and it made all the difference. It made all the difference. That 1 year, it wasn't the end of it, right? There's still things now that have to happen, but I followed my gut in that year and said, we're not going to what you had planned. We're staying home and we're having ABA, intensive ABA happening in the home. And there were times when I wondered whether I made the right choice, but I talked about this the other day that at the end of that year, the previous year, they've been saying to me he needs to be in the most restrictive environment that we have. But at the end of that year, they said, no, he qualifies for the least restrictive environment. He qualifies for inclusion as still as preschool, as a 4-year-old. And that I had the opportunity to see a child who had been with my son the year before in his EI program, that had gone still to that setting. And I watched him attempting to walk on the sidewalk up to greet his mother as I saw my child coming back from speech, because he did do speech and OT, and I saw the two of the children coming towards me. Now, you can't compare children, right? And you can't compare outcomes. But I have never been so glad that I made the decision I did. So if your gut is saying no, I just want to honor that for you and say, follow your gut. Follow your gut, follow your gut, follow your gut. Because when we get clear on what our gut says as a mom, things happen, right? And if you need some help and support, please write to me. Okay. In any case, moving on, another person who says, again, we're answering the question, what's the most difficult part of getting your IEP signed and done? Getting them to allow early dismissal from school for ABA therapy daily. He has been going for 3 years, 5 days a week. Since he started kindergarten, it was, and still is, a huge issue to take him out an hour early from school to go. The district refuses to see it as a medical appointment. It is a speech therapy or OT or physical. If it is speech therapy or OT or physical therapy, it's okay. I got to be honest, I have never heard of anybody asking for that early dismissal so that they can go do ABA therapy, and that's very intriguing to me. And it is, it's constantly a battle with me about when they want to do speech and OT. I'm always saying you can't take them out of class time. That curriculum time is, because that's my mother's instinct about that as an ex-teacher. I'm like, no, that's inviolate. We're not doing that. You're not pulling them out to do these other things. I want those other things, but I want them outside the instruction time. And as he gets older, there's more instruction time, so there's less time for them to be able to do things. And he's needing less and less. But we only had half-day kindergarten, so I wasn't asking for him to be removed to go to ABA. He would go to kindergarten half-day, and then he would have ABA at home the rest of the day. But really interesting to me that you're asking to leave an hour early, and I imagine that they are putting up a fuss, although they're probably asking for him to be removed for the speech and the OT. So bless you. That wouldn't even have occurred to me, and I'm sure it is an uphill battle. Hopefully you're doing so well with ABA that it's not going to continue much longer. But I'd love to hear how things work out with that. That's a very interesting thing to be asking for. It never even occurred to me. So somebody wrote in and said that about the case where people are leaving and being rude, and she said, as for my knowledge, that is more than rude. It's illegal. IEPs are legal documents. Tell your sister to get a lawyer, double check with a professional, get another opinion. But again, and I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but any IEP that I've ever been at that there's been a tape recorder, the person has had to ask for permission to be excused. And I think if you have that on a tape recorder that somebody gets up and says, I'm leaving, I've got other things to do, that's when you go, because you just made a mistake. And my IEP process just got easier. I know it's a weird way to look at things, but when they make mistakes and you've got it on the tape recorder, okay, you get the idea. But get some help. Get a lawyer. You can consult with somebody, get the free consultation so that it's free, and then see if you need to move forward. Another person who writes in and says, getting the services my kids need, also the district not following our settlement agreement. Yeah, that's, once you have everything on the IEP, right, then you tend to think, whew, we're home free. But a lot of times you're not. A lot of times they don't follow what they wrote down in the legal document. And then you have a new battle. And the last thing we need is a battle, right? We just want to be able to help our children. And none of us wants to, this is what I wish school districts would understand. None of us wants to spend the time having to battle things. We don't. We would rather be working on things for our kids or doing laundry even. And I don't like doing laundry, but I would rather do laundry than argue. But when they are not compliant, and that's exactly the word that we want to use, we can say not compliant, not in compliance with the IEP. And if you have the IEP in hand and always have it someplace where you can refer to it, if they are not in compliance, you want to immediately write to them and say, I want to bring to your attention that you are not in compliance. What is our timeline for getting this fixed? Because I don't want to have to pursue this legally. Because if you go to a lawyer, one of the first things they're going to ask is, are they out of compliance? Lawyers love to take cases where the schools are out of compliance, and sometimes will even do it pro bono because it makes it easier for their other cases. If they have 3 wins against a school district and they've got the paying client where they know it's going to be a little harder, but they've got 3 wins already, it's going to make it easier for them. And if the school district is not in compliance, that's a win-win for the lawyer. So don't let compliance go. Get it in writing saying not in compliance, what's your timeline to amend it, and if they don't, it's time to lawyer up. I hate to be saying that to you, but sometimes you can get pro bono. Another person who writes in and says, getting the teacher to give my son what I wanted, not her way. It's really tough. Get it written into the IEP, and a lot of times it's hard to get written into the IEP the method that they get something done. The exception is the BIP, the Behavior Intervention Plan. They won't talk about a method, but they will outline exactly what has to happen in a given circumstance. So if your child, this is the way you get around a teacher who's not going to do it your way. If your child's doing something and it's in any way a challenging behavior, you ask for an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, because you want a behavior intervention plan for that behavior. And what's going to happen is the BCBA that's attached to the school will come in, do the FBA. They will sit down with the team, which you're a part of. You do the behavior intervention plan. Everybody signs off on it, and then the teacher has to do it that way. It gets attached to the IEP, and guess what? If he or she is not following the behavior intervention plan, she's not in compliance, which means the school's not in compliance. So that's the quickest way that I am aware of to get that taken care of. But, you know, what may happen is that they may, if you say the teacher's just not doing it, they may say, we're going to move this child. And if the teacher's not following the behavior intervention plan, as stressful as it is to change teachers, worth it. Another person who writes in, getting teachers to do their job. And I hate to hear that as a teacher, because I know some of the most amazing teachers on the face of the planet, but I also know some teachers who just aren't interested for whatever reason. And, you know, move as far away from those teachers as you can, as quickly as you can. It's terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Okay, another person who writes in and say they refuse to put a behavior plan into his IEP because preschool is only 3 hours long. They don't see the issues I do. So when we filled out his IEP for kindergarten, I stressed full days, they're going to have issues. They won't look at it till it happens. I just want them to make sure he's away from other children and objects he can throw when he has a tantrum. He will swing, hit, punch, and throw stuff. You know what? I would consult with a lawyer about this, but I would make sure that you put that in writing, your concerns, and say, we have been seeing this behavior at home. I feel very strongly that we need to have a behavior intervention plan for this at school, or there is the likelihood that someone is going to get hurt, whether it's my child or another child, and I would hate to see that happen, as I'm sure you would too. But I would consult with a lawyer about it. The school's argument is, if we're not seeing the behavior, how can we write a behavior intervention plan for behavior that's only happening at home? But if you say there's the potential for injurious or self-injurious behavior, they should get on that. And if they don't, get a lawyer. And again, you know, there are some lawyers who will do pro bono for this kind of thing. Okay, another person who writes in and says, for me, it was the school district's not wanting to pay for services my daughter needed, but we won without having to get an advocate after 5 years of fighting. Okay, another person who says they seem to stick to a script. Yes, I had to fight to be able to get her to be able to sit on the floor and not have to go into a cube chair at circle time. Just because it's worked for kids before or it's more convenient for the teacher doesn't mean it's going to work for my child. I was so cross. As it turns out, my daughter can sit just fine on a carpet at circle time. Good mom fighting and saying, you know, I'm sorry, you got your cookie cutter out, not going to work here. Perfect example of why we have IEPs, so the child can sit on the floor. If they can access the curriculum and it's not bothering anybody else, get over yourselves that it needs to be in a cube chair, people. But good mom for getting it done. Another person who says not listening and doing their job. Ooh, make them. Get it on tape. Make them do their jobs. Another one, I love this. I guess I've been lucky. We have been able to get my grandson 2 years of preschool with a 1-to-2 ratio of teacher-students. He gets much help at the school, and the people there are fantastic. He's learned so much and has a much easier time dealing with his sensory disorder because of those people. I hope this continues throughout his school years. Another person who writes in and says, waiting. That's the most difficult part of getting the IEP signed. She writes, waiting. Waiting. Did I mention waiting? I know, it's tough. Okay, there's another person who wrote in, actually, and I meant to answer this yesterday, who said, wondering if anyone can help. Son is almost 7, diagnosed with Asperger's last April, has put the child on some medication, which, you know, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to address the medication part of it. In order to help him to go through school. We're now trying to get an IEP through school, but since he doesn't show that he needs services, it is proving very difficult. Don't want to make his life harder by taking him off the meds. I know that sometimes people will advocate that you take your kids off the meds. You know, and it's a really tough thing for parents. But feeling like there is no other way to get him the services at school that he deserves, OT and speech. Can anyone help with this situation? We have a child study meeting in the morning to determine his needs, although they have already told us he probably won't qualify. Help, please. I'm going to write offline to this person as well, but if you're in a situation like this, I think it's a really good time to ask for some help for a lawyer or an advocate. Often there are organizations that will help you with school issues in your community. I know that we have them here in Los Angeles, that they will intervene and offer sometimes free or very low-cost legal advice. It's a really difficult decision to decide whether it's medication or not. There are a lot of people who will express how frustrating it is that, you know, your child has to be at their worst behavior on the day that they're observed, right? Because sometimes they're not going to get services otherwise. But I really want to encourage you to reach out to you. I don't know where you are in the country, and I want you to reach out to your local support group and say, who are the people that I can talk to? Who are the advocates that have the potential to help me in this circumstance? Who are the lawyers who are really good with this kind of thing? Who are the diagnosticians that can help me money, because maybe if you get a really good diagnostician and get a private diagnosis, you're not going to have to worry about anything else. You know, it can take care of it. Sometimes it's so worth it to get that private diagnosis. So I hope that you'll take some time and let me know, and I will be emailing that person separately. But for another person, their answer to what's been the hardest part is not knowing the future. And I think that, in a nutshell, we don't know. We get the IEP. We don't know how it's going to work through the year. We don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. And that's hard, but we got to stay in the moment, right? What's happening right now? What can I do today? And then everything else has to take a back seat. Otherwise, we lose too much sleep, right? Okay, so we need to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, I believe we're talking about cognition. I could be completely wrong. I've got all my notes all over everywhere. I think... No, we're talking about executive functions, attention, sustaining attention. That's a really cool thing. Okay, so we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back in just a minute with EF.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD eLearning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD eLearning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD eLearning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that, they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD eLearning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD eLearning is really, really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD eLearning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And one of my favorite things to talk about here is executive functions and teaching our children executive functions, because as a parent, when my son was diagnosed, and they have the puzzle piece everywhere that signifies that there's a piece that's missing, that you can be sitting and talking with someone, an adult or a teenager, even a small child with autism, and sometimes a lot of stuff is happening and you see that there's a lot going on there, but there's just that one little element that is different, right? And that's preventing them. I don't mean different in terms of being unique and unusual. We love those aspects of things, but a piece that's missing that's preventing them from being able to connect and do the things that they want to do. It's really preventing them from meeting their full potential, right? And as I delved into ABA and understanding what was happening with my son, one of the things that I discovered is that here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, they have two areas of their curriculum that nobody else has. The cognition curriculum and the executive functions curriculum, which get to the heart of what I think that missing puzzle piece is. There's so many skills that our children need to get caught up, right? And those are important and fabulous, and they teach your child how to learn and open up a new world for your child. But then there's that element, once you get to a certain level, of being able to understand the world around them and apply what they know that often seems to be missing. But the cognition curriculum and the executive functions curriculum really get at those things. So I get excited when I get an opportunity to talk about the executive functions. And by the way, it's not just our kids on the spectrum, right? Haven't you ever experienced in your life that there are certain things that you're really good at and that you can do and that you know how to apply yourself and things clip along, but then there's other things that it's like you get to that portion of a task and you just can't quite get to the level that you want to get, whether it's in your job or with relationships or getting your house clean, right? There's just some element of it that just holds you back, right? Or don't you know somebody in life that you look at them and you go, oh, they're so brilliant and they're so talented, and why have they not been able to achieve the success in their career that you see that they're capable of? Because they just can't put it all together. They haven't been able to figure out how to put it all together and achieve the goal of the thing that they know they really want. So isn't there some element of that we can all personally relate to? I got to tell you, the executive functions curriculum that has been researched and used by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders for years and years and years, I think is the step-by-step guide for all of us to be able to solve those issues. I really do. I mean, and I'm not just saying it because I work on these things with my son in the skills program, but I'm gonna be honest, and I've said this before on the show, I work on some of these things with myself, and that I've changed some of the ways that I do things as a result of reading these lessons, because it's eye-opening to me, and I go, oh, I don't do this one, and that if I did this particular lesson along with the other things that I do, I might be more successful at achieving the things that I want to achieve. So I get really excited talking about it. Because taking executive functions, it's all the things that we need to be able to do to actually achieve a goal. Whatever it is that we want to achieve, all the different steps that we need to do to actually arrive at the goal. And there's so many different things that we could talk about, but I want to talk about today attention. Because this is something that we can work on, but we can also work on with our children wherever they are in the spectrum and whatever age they are. Developing the ability to attend to things that we want to attend to be able to shift our focus from something that we want to attend to something that we really would prefer not to attend to, right? To be able to sustain our attention into something, whether it's something we want to attend to or not. To be able to give our attention with someone else, to that joint attention that I talk about, to be able to attend to more than one thing at a time, and to disengage from things that we need to disengage from attention-wise. It's a lot of different things there, and we can work on these things with very small children. We can work on these things with teenagers. We can work on these things with ourselves. And by the way, you can work on this with people on the spectrum, and you can work on this with people who aren't on the spectrum, right? So attention, and how do we work on it? Like everything else, we're going to work on it in very small increments. We're not going to try to achieve the entire thing in one sitting. We're going to work on it in little itty bitty steps, and we're going to reinforce the kind of attention that we want to. And especially with attention, sometimes because it's such a time thing, a time-driven thing in some cases, that if we're trying to teach sustained attention to a child, for instance, let's start with a child. It could be a child on the spectrum, a child not on the spectrum. And if you look at curriculums around the world, they'll say, okay, well, when a child is very young and say kindergarten age, that we have an expectation that a child should be able to attend and sit in circle time for a certain amount of time. This is always hilarious to me to find out how long people think that a 5-year-old child should be able to sit and attend in a circle, because you will hear things all over the map. You'll hear one person say that what's appropriate is to be able to attend to something for 4 minutes, and another person who thinks it's appropriate for a child to be able to sit in a circle and attend to something with no challenging behaviors for an hour. A typical child to be able to do that. And I always say, show me that child. Show me that child, because I have concerns for that child. You know, that is not appropriate for a 5-year-old to be able to sit and attend anything that's happening in circle time for an hour with no fidgeting. I don't think we want that, right? And yet sometimes that will be written into an IEP and you just go, really? Really? What? I don't understand that at all. So we want to start with what's appropriate, right? We don't want to be working to get a child to sit for an hour when they're 5 years old, especially for a non-preferred activity. That just seems inappropriate to me. As I mentioned before, I use Skills at Home because it tells me already what's age appropriate. It's already done all that research for me so that I'm not being asked to attain a goal that isn't age appropriate. But when we're working on attention, we want to follow the basic principles of ABA, and principle number 1 that we talk about all the time. I'm going to get like a t-shirt or a pillow or something we put on set that says, principle number 1 is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, it must be reinforced. So if we want a child to attend for 5 minutes, we're not going to try to get the child to attend for 5 minutes in the beginning, right? That would be foolhardy. It would be taking too much on. We would set ourselves up for something less than success. So what we would do, first of all, is take a baseline and look at, if it's something really preferred, how long can the child already attend? Can they attend for 30 seconds? If they can, then we want to start at like 25 seconds and reinforce them for paying attention for 25 seconds, because we know we're going to be successful. If they can already do 30 seconds, let's reinforce at 25 seconds. And then we can move to reinforcing at 30 seconds, and then we can move to reinforcing at 35 seconds, and then we can go to 40 seconds, and then we can go to 45 seconds, but we're going to work our way up to that 5 minutes, right? Makes sense. And yet, a lot of times we get impatient and we go, well, they can do 30 seconds, let's try for a minute. I don't know what it is in our brains that we go, well, let's just see. Well, you already did the wait and see. You saw that the child can do it for 30 seconds. And so now you want to set up this circumstance where you're reinforcing along the way, and that's how you're going to reach success. So that's getting a child for sustained attention. When we're looking to do joint attention, which is the thing that we talk about all the time here on the show, that moment when you're looking at something, the child is looking at something, you look at each other to gauge gauge each other's reactions, and then you look back at the thing, look back at each other, and it becomes this triangle of attention that's going all the way around the triangle. Very beginning, early milestone that we want to absolutely go back and pick up if we've missed. And a lot of times with kids on the autism spectrum, we miss this milestone, or they had it and they lost it. Right? And there's lots of tears that we can shed over that. Believe me, you're entitled to them. But you gotta go back and pick up this important thread. It's the beginning of conversation. It's the beginning of empathy. It's the beginning of being interested in people as opposed to things. So if the child is 18, you got to go back and pick up this thread. And the way that we do that is that we reinforce it. We're going to make it so reinforcing. So we're going to set up a circumstance where there's something that the child loves to engage their attention with, right? And we're going to come into the circumstance and we are going to interrupt their attention there to get their attention, but we got to make it really reinforcing for us to first get their attention, and then we want to encourage them. We're going to prompt them to look back at it and look back at us, and we are going to reinforce that like crazy, because we want for them to find it extra fun to be looking at us and looking back. You know, the perfect example that I can think of for my son is that my son and my husband have this silly game that they have played forever, that my son finds still almost 9, and he still finds this really reinforcing. And at some point, my husband's going to be too old to do this. But I don't know how they invented this, but my husband will sit, and it must have happened organically one day that my husband was sitting and looking at a newspaper on the floor, sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading the newspaper, and my son came running and crashed into him, and my husband threw the paper and made this loud noise, and then they fell backwards laughing on the floor. So now there are rules to it that, you know, that he's old enough now that he has to warn Daddy that he's doing this. When he was little, he didn't. But my son thinks this is hilarious, absolutely hilarious. So when we started working on joint attention, one of the things that we did was that he got to do this thing, but we built in that he had to look at me and see if I thought that it was hilarious, right? And then he would look back at Daddy and look back at me, and we would all find it extra hilarious. And once we went, and he couldn't do it again until we had gone through that moment and he looked at both of us, and then he could go back and do it again. And it is the beginnings of conversation. So he's looking at me going, you know, and noticing my reaction, which was huge as well, makes it really reinforcing for our kids. So a fabulous thing. There are all of these lessons and teacher guides for all of them to give you suggestions and exemplars, all in skills, by the way. So, and there's how you can get to skillsforautism.com. But we want to work on attention, and we want to make it really reinforcing for them to be able to do all the different kinds of attention, disengaging, all of those things. I'm personally working on disengaging attention because sometimes I get into doing something and I don't want to leave it. I just don't want to leave it. And sometimes that is a really good trait, but a lot of times it's not. So that's one of the things that I'm working on in executive functions, and you can work on them too. Okay, we got to take a short break, and then I'm so excited. We're going to come back and we're going to be Skyping with Soo Cho. She is a wonderful, wonderful therapist who's been working with children for many years and travels all around the world to help families to be able to train their therapists and design a program for their kids all over the world. So we're going to be talking with her specifically about gaining functional communication skills. So you're going to want to stick around for that. We'll be right back.
I'm Monique Erickson. I'm a senior supervisor here at CARD in the training department.
What are some things we should take into consideration when we're working with school-age children?
I think when you're looking at school-age children, what you need to consider is, one, that they're in school all day. They're school-age. So what that means to us is that they're going to be tired by the time they get home. They're having a full day of hopefully demands being placed on them so that they're learning in that environment. But by the time they're home, you know, they've had a pretty good full day at that point already. So you're looking at catching them at the end of their day, the tail end. So I think that's a really big consideration when you're looking at realistically how much time can you get into that day, what can you expect from them at that hour of the day, and so forth.
Realistically, how long can they work?
When you're looking at how long the school-age kids can work, you just remember their day. They've already had a full day, and so you're probably getting them later in the afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock, going to, you're maybe getting a couple hours in, maybe going till 6 or so. So you need to take that into consideration. They've had a long day. How long they can work really depends on that child and engaging, when do they start to lose focus? When I've given them breaks and they really can't refocus. That by 5:30 they're done, and it's too difficult, or it's not really effective anymore to move forward later into the evening. So I think that, again, looking at the child as an individual and just gauging how long can they go. It's not going to be, you're not going to be getting 4 hours in after a long school day. That's too much to expect.
How often should we give a school-age child a break, and how long of a break should it be?
Just by the unfortunate nature of the day, you're running out of time, so there isn't a really big gap between them getting home typically and when you can get that last stretch of the teaching time in. So you want to give them a break. You may have to get started sooner than, maybe they could use a longer break, but there really isn't time to allow for that. A good way to do that is just kind of ease into your session. So maybe start with those lighter lessons that you might have. If you're working on adaptive skills, maybe starting with some of that stuff, maybe having a snack and building into your session so that you go to those more difficult things. But also keeping in mind that you also don't want to save the most difficult thing for the 6 o'clock hour, because that may not be the best time to do that either, because it is such a long day. So I think you have to really know your child, gauge how that day was. Are they really spent from the day that they've had so far? And organize yourself accordingly. And that may vary from day to day. But I do think starting with maybe a snack or easing into that session a little bit with some lighter lessons is a good idea.
How do you keep a school-age child motivated?
I think that there are school-age children that are difficult to motivate or may have different motivators, and there's younger children that are difficult to motivate. So it really is probably a more individualized, looking at that individual person and seeing what is motivating to them and what we need to do. So it might be a little bit different more with older children, but I think that that's probably something we're always looking at when we're doing this type of intervention.
Where can we go to look for ideas of how to motivate them?
When you're looking at motivating our school-age children, I think you want to first, they're an individual, look at what's reinforcing to them. Every child is going to be different, so it's really hard to say this will work for this child, this won't. You have to really look at that child as an individual and assess what they like and may not like. Some good strategies or thoughts, that might help you is maybe looking at their typical peers and what are they doing? What are those school-age children doing? What do they like to talk about and what are they playing with? And try to introduce those to our children. They may take to them right away and they may not, but if you introduce them and kind of guide them in that direction, we might be able to get them on more age-appropriate, types of reinforcers that will be able to mesh better with their peers when we get to the point of having play dates and so forth and working on those social skills.
And what should our expectations be of working with a school-age child?
When you're working with school-age children, some of the things we can expect is, hopefully at that point we have some of the behaviors under control. They're better able to attend and participate in their lessons, but the curriculum starts to change. What we're working on tends to change, and so it may not be going as fast and making these huge leaps and bounds with some of the curriculum areas that we had early on that are more kind of just things that they can memorize and add to their repertoire, like expanding their noun repertoire, their names of objects and so forth. The curriculum starts to get a little more advanced and requires more, so it may take a little bit longer to go through those programs, and that's okay. You should know that because that's what's expected. It's going to take longer to learn some of these skills. We're looking for concept formation versus just memorizing certain information or facts. So I think that that's one thing you can expect. May not go as fast, but that's okay. That's how it is moving through the curriculum. Maybe that they may not have the same amount of energy because they are in school all day and it is the tail end of the day. They are possibly tired, so it may not, you may require more energy on your part or more resourcefulness in coming up with those reinforcers and keeping them motivated and keeping them going. Reading their body language. Do I need to take a break? Do I need to let them get up and move around a little bit to pep them back up so we can keep going? I think those are some things that come to mind when we're looking at what to expect with those kids.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're here webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And it's Thursday, it's 11 o'clock, so you know we like to bring in a guest to be able to talk to you about a different topic. And I'm so excited that via Skype today we have with us Soo Cho. And you have seen Soo on some of the different videos that we play, and she's been a guest before on this show. She is an amazing woman who travels the globe providing supervision and support for families around the world, helping their children to access ABA tools and skills. She's just, Soo, well, let's welcome her to the show, and then we'll talk about how many miles she's logged over the years. There she is. Hey, Soo, how you doing?
Hi, Shannon. I'm great. How are you?
I'm thrilled that you're here, and I see that you're wearing, is that pink?
No, it's actually orange and pink today.
Okay.
Orange.
All right. Well, you're always very bright. You've got bright colors on, and I always appreciate that. But Soo, how many miles would you say that you've logged over the years in the quest to provide autism information and treatment around the world? Do you know what a total?
I know for certain with one airline that with one airline this year I'll hit 3 million.
Wow. Okay, and that's just one airline. So
that was just with one airline that I really keep track with. So
and
yeah.
How long have you been working in the field of autism?
I've been working in the field of autism for almost 20 years.
Wow. And you don't look old enough to be able to say that. So you were like 8 years old when you started working in the field of autism.
But I've been with CARD since 1996.
Okay. That's pretty amazing.
It's officially a CARD employee, but prior to that, I was a workshop therapist.
Wonderful.
So I work privately with a family.
Wonderful. Well, I specifically asked you to join us today. We're talking about language, and I wanted to start talking about functional communication skills, why it's so important, and how we teach functional communication skills, and how and where we begin, and that sometimes there's a decision to not work on vocal speech, but to work on other things, and how we determine that. So help me out here. How do we start, and how do we know when to go down a path of looking at iconic communication or something else?
I think that actually when I first started doing this, we looked at using iconic communication much later on. Mm-hmm. But nowadays we're looking at if your child does not have a consistent ability to imitate vocal speech or have any vocal speech on their own, we're oftentimes going into something right from the beginning. And the reason for that is that the research actually shows that by using something like an iconic system with pictures or words or symbols, that it will help your child develop speech faster.
Yeah, I think it's an emotional thing for parents, but it's so good to hear you say that the research supports that it actually will help.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know that for myself, especially when I was a beginning supervisor, I was reluctant to use it, just like you're saying, in that you feel as though if you're using something in place of the vocal speech, that you're not targeting vocal speech. Yeah. But it's actually quite the contrary. The whole thing about teaching functional communication is that when the child realizes that they can use another method for communicating other than problem behaviors, and they can do it quickly and easily, then they will go to the new way of doing it.
Yeah.
And so if you can have that success from the very, very beginning, then you are really helping the child comprehend what functional, appropriate communication is.
Yeah. And as you say, you know, for parents to realize that not only are you going to see a bump in their functional communication, but the byproduct is a decrease in the challenging behavior, and that's a lovely day. that's a really good thing.
Absolutely.
So how do you begin teaching functional?
So I think that no matter what, so it really depends on your learner. So for example, if your child has no vocal ability whatsoever, or vocalization is extremely difficult for them, we remember, we want the child to be successful. So if that is the case, then from the beginning, I would go with something like maybe it's pointing, or maybe it's leading, because for some children, they may not even start with that in the repertoire.
Yeah.
Again, looking at how to make them as successful as possible from the beginning.
Yeah. So how do you teach pointing, Sue? How do you actually teach pointing?
We do it by physically doing it hand over hand to start. So it might just be in the beginning that I just want them to gesture in that direction. But then what I might do in one of their motor lessons is work on pointing specifically. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll use something like the top of a water bottle. And so then I would have maybe a sticker on the inside of the top of the lid so that the child can isolate their finger and stick it into the top of the water bottle or the lid. And so again, too, that small bottle or the opening, you could also use like the spool from a tape dispenser, because you're looking for something that's going to have digit isolation, so that they can isolate and put one finger inside.
Okay.
So that's something as simple as how you could start. And for some kids, you may not even need to do that. You might just need to demonstrate it to them. So I might just show them and point, and then they copy me pointing.
And of course, we would reinforce that then.
Absolutely. And again, the biggest thing is remembering that because we want the child to be successful, the effort shouldn't be so difficult that it's extremely difficult for them to attain. Because if it is that it's harder for them to do the new behavior that we want, then they'll go back to the old behavior instead.
That's a really good point. So the new behavior has to be easier for them than the old behavior was.
Yes, absolutely. But let's say we have a child that they can imitate speech. So I'm actually going to use my nephew as an example. And he's neurotypical, but for him, before he learned how to speak, whenever he wanted to do things by himself, he would shout, throw himself on the floor. Okay, so this is something that typical parents have to deal with as well.
Yeah.
And so I told my brother, I said, the reason why he's screaming is that he can't tell you that he wants to do it by himself. And so then my brother said, oh, okay. And I'll use his name. My nephew's name is Steven. And he said, Steven, say by myself. Well, Steven is still screaming because he didn't have the ability to say all those words.
Right.
And so what we had to do for him was I said, just tell him to say self. That's it.
Right.
If he says self, then we let him do it by himself. And so he was about to scream, and I looked at him and I said, say self. And he goes, self. And I go, okay, you can do it by yourself. And he was so excited. He was so empowered in the fact that he didn't have to say this entire phrase, which was difficult for him. All he had to do was say self.
And he didn't have to throw himself on the floor, which, by the way, takes a lot of energy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so when he realized that all he had to do was say self, then he just started running around, and anytime he wanted to do something by himself, he'd say self, 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 self. But then when he was starting to do that, then we realized, okay, we can make it more difficult now and say myself. And then he started saying myself. And then eventually we were saying, say by myself. And then he was saying by myself. And he had a way of building what he was able to communicate from in segments rather than starting from a difficult phrase.
Yeah. And what a great example for a child who's neurotypical, but then when we're dealing with a child on the spectrum, sometimes it isn't that much more complicated, but if the child is really having trouble accessing vocalization and it's a big struggle for them, that's when we would go back to the pointing or using an iconic communication system, right?
Yes, exactly. So the other thing too, though, is that a lot of times I'll speak to parents and I'll ask them, does your child imitate vocal speech?
Okay.
And they'll say yes. But the next question is how consistently is your child imitating that speech? Because if your child is not doing it 80% of the time, 75% of the time, then your child's going to get really frustrated. Because oftentimes it's not that they don't want to do it. It's just that they don't yet have the control or the ability to consistently respond when it's to do so, or when necessary.
Okay. And so that, again, that's when we would go to something else, whether it's pointing or iconic communication system. But that's outside of our experience as parents. We don't know how to teach that. So give us a quick on how do we teach that?
Okay. I don't have the myself one, but let's say I have an apple here. Okay? And then I also have an icon of an apple.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And so what I might do for a child that is just learning to communicate from the start is that when I see that they want the apple, and maybe I know that they want it because they're reaching for it,
Mm-hmm.
then rather than just having them reach for it, what I'm going to do instead is I will prompt them to take this picture of the apple and then hand it to me and put it in my hand. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why this is important to put into someone else's hand is that then it's requiring the child to engage with another human being.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if it is that, let's say I have the apple in the book, but they were just pointing to the book, the difficulty is that, let's say the book is in the kitchen, but I'm in the living room. And so the child is in the kitchen pointing to the book, but I'm not there to receive that information that they've attempted to communicate.
Right.
Which is why we really want to foster an exchange with another individual.
Okay,
so
great.
that they realize that they have to communicate it to another person.
Wonderful. And that would not have occurred to me, but a really important thing. And in the beginning, I imagine that you can do it just by yourself with one person, but isn't it easier if you've got two people? So you've got a facilitator and the person they're giving it to?
Yes, you can. And when we teach our therapists at our centers how to do this, we typically suggest that when you start, you use a therapist, a child, and the parent or a caregiver.
Okay.
So that the therapist is prompting the child to get the symbol and then hand it to the other adult.
Okay.
But then, because therapy is typically one-to-one, then we will oftentimes just have the therapist and the child in the session where the therapist is prompting and receiving at the same time.
Okay. Now, how does this change when we do it on technology, Sue? Because more and more we're seeing that people are going to the devices and doing the programs on the devices. So what does it look like when you do it there?
And I happen to have one today. So there are a lot of different levels of communication. I'm going to tilt it down a little bit so you can see a little bit better.
Okay.
When you're using augmentative communication.
Okay.
So this one, actually, the program is $149.
Okay.
And so often I wouldn't have a family invest in something like this unless we know that we're going to use it for a little while.
Okay.
Okay. And with this program, what I did is, I don't know if you can see this, but I actually took a picture of that specific apple and then put it in here so that I used a photograph instead of an iconic representation.
Right.
And so what I've got this one program to do, and I also have it programmed in several levels. So with programs like this too, you can adjust the button size.
Okay.
So in this case, there's 4 buttons across, 4 buttons up and down. And so what I'll do though in this case is I hit the word apple. And then you could program it to just say apple when you hit it. So let's say your child we want them to immediately hear the word. In this case, what I did was I want the child to eventually be able to make a sentence. So I put it in so that I hit the word apple, and then the apple pops up on the sentence strip. And then I hit the sentence strip for it to speak. I'll do it again.
Okay.
Apple. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I heard it. Apple.
Okay. So then let's say my child has a little more language, then what I might want to do instead is maybe I want to do a sentence. Okay. But especially when I'm teaching a system from the beginning, I want to make it as simple as possible so that I'm actually requiring the child to be successful and have variety.
Okay.
I probably would not go to a full sentence until after they've gotten quite a few items, or maybe they've just shown that they can rapidly learn different objects or actions to request for. So, but let's say I'm doing sentences, then I did this where I have an I want symbol, and then I have apple, and it puts it all up in the sentence, and so it would say, I want apple.
Nice.
So then I make a sentence.
Wonderful. Okay.
But there are lots of different ways that you can, that you can program these systems. This is just one. I have another one on here too, which is a much simpler form. And so in this case, I think when I bought this was 99 cents.
Okay.
And it says, I want. And then I can actually select an image in here. So let's see. I'm going to go to snacks. Oh, apple's my first one. So this one would be,
I want apple.
Okay, now before we were having the child put it in your hand, now the program is speaking for them, but are there rules about that they have to bring this device to you and touch it in front of you so that you can hear it?
That would be preferable. So I have to say, though, that that is something, too, that I often consider before going to something augmentative or like technology-wise. I find that if your child does not understand that they have to communicate with another person, that I would often go to some paper method first, because one, is really inexpensive, and also it requires the child to actually give it to somebody.
Okay, so you're making that contact.
Didn't have that comprehension, and usually it's for kids that never hand lead, never point, never try to get your attention. Those are the kids that would probably start off with something where they actually had to give it to somebody.
Okay. A really
and then it would branch off into the technology. But there's something, though, I mean, I'm so grateful that the tablets and the iPads and things came out. And because it's, even though it is costly, it's still significantly less expensive than the more advanced technology forms specifically for communication, like Springboard, Dynavox, those types of things.
And they were heavy and cumbersome, too.
Yes, they are heavy. It's pretty amazing what you can do with them as far as communicating, but they're very expensive and also big. Yes, very big and cumbersome.
And I just don't think they're as reinforcing for the child as the iPads are. There's so many things, or the other technologies. Okay, so really interesting. And again, we have to drive home the point that you would, at some point, begin transitioning a lot of our kids back into voice after you've gotten this.
Absolutely, yes. In fact, not many of the times, always, once they've gotten the hang of the actual physical aspect of it and discriminating between pictures and things, then we will require vocalization from them.
Okay.
Because at the same time, what we're doing, though, is separately we're working on vocal imitation.
Right.
And so apart from this concept of asking for what I want using a picture or a word or using a device, separately I'm working on having the child imitate what I ask them to say. And then hopefully, and oftentimes, once the child has developed the communication part, as far as doing the behavior of giving me the icon or pushing the button, etc., their imitation skills have improved.
Yeah.
And so then we can start pairing the vocalization with it. And so ultimately, though, when the child is able to vocalize without me having to direct them or the device having to speak for them, then they start using the speech on their own.
Isn't that amazing? Okay.
And
well, I was just going to say we should take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you to talk to us about manding, about how we teach manding, why manding is so important, and kind of goes hand in hand with some of the things that we've been talking about. So let's take a break, and we'll be back in just a minute with more with Soo Cho. I'm here today with Soo Cho, who is the managing supervisor of CARD Fresno. And she's a wonderful resource, and today we're going to be talking with her about using assisted technology.
If you are a parent of a child who is primarily non-vocal and maybe has been using a type of iconic communication system, and you are recognizing that your child has really just outgrown it. You know, it is something, they need something faster, they need something better. There's so much more that we can do in the world of augmentative devices. I am a huge fan of using augmentative device programs on cell phones and also on iPads. As you and I were chatting, we had just downloaded a really simple tap to talk program. So for this one, all a child would need to be able to do is just tap on what they wanted.
I want a drink.
And then that immediately pulls up a screen where there's water, juice, milk, soda, and smoothie. So maybe the child just wanted a drink of their water.
Water, please.
And it's that simple. And there's not a lot to manipulate. The child does not have to have really advanced motor skills at all.
We're seeing more and more organizations advocating getting an iPad because of all those features. But it's not just for kids who are non-vocal.
We have a lot of kids, who have significant impairment in their sensory regulation. They really are seeking visual input, auditory input, tactile input, and if they're learning to appropriately play with a cell phone or with an iPad or with a computer, it provides those levels of appropriate sensory stimulation. So you're getting appropriate sensory, hopefully leading to a decrease in some of those repetitive behaviors, and you're teaching age-appropriate play skills. They have free apps, even if you're working on verb use, and the child can actually scroll through the different pictures and practice talking and narrating what they see in the pictures. There's just a lot of wonderful things that you can get from devices nowadays. Whether we're looking at language, social, play.
For my son, it's quite the social thing. When he sees somebody else who has one, he gravitates to them and they start playing together. It really starts the conversation with the other child.
What games do you have? What apps do you have? Can I play that one? Can I see it?
Yeah. And a lot of the apps are super inexpensive or free. Which is, you can't be free. Free is good.
You might have that initial investment in actually purchasing an appropriate device, but then a lot of the software or things that you need, are free or relatively inexpensive. There are also some really nice applications that might be a little bit more expensive, maybe like $20 or $30, or you can essentially download the entire, for example, PEC's icon library for just that little initial, investment.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters, and our special guest right now is the wonderful Soo Cho. And Sue has been talking to us about teaching functional communication skills. And Sue, you probably couldn't see, but we just showed a video of Sarah Cho also talking about functional communication skills. And we have to mention that it is pure coincidence that the two of you are last name Cho. For the longest time, I thought, well, they must be sisters-in-law, or somehow, but it's just pure coincidence,
Yes.
which is a funny little fact. But you're both brilliant at talking about these things, and we were talking about functional communication skills and technology, and you had made a comment during the break about why you love these things. So I want you to tell the listeners at home why you love technology so much.
So one of the things that I really love about technology is that because the repetition of the words being played out the same because it's recorded or it's generated by the computer, children that are using the OGCOM, the vocal output, all of them have increased their vocalization, and many of them have gone on to not requiring the augmentative communication for their communication needs. They're able to speak.
Which is a wonderful thing. And you were bringing up the point that because it's the same every time, that the leaps are sometimes greater. So I think that that's a really important thing for people to know. As parents, we tend to be so resistant, because it seems like, oh, I don't want to go down that path because that'll be permanent. And I just love the fact that that is not what it means. And
I'll give you an example of a kid that we started with this. We started this particular program that I showed you. He is echolalic, so he will imitate anything you ask him to say. But he's been with us for a year, but his issue was that he couldn't spontaneously generate new requests on his own very quickly. So he would work on a new request for 3 months before acquiring it on his own.
Wow.
And so what we did with him was we got a program on his iPad, and we programmed the vocabulary that we wanted him to start using on his own. And so literally within the first week, he started asking questions. Wow. And we've been using him vocally for asking questions for months, I promise you.
Wow.
And within days, he picked it up, and now for things such as the other day, I guess at school, what had happened was he was on the playground and one of the kids had fallen down and they were crying. He spontaneously went up to them and said, "What happened?"
Oh, that's wonderful.
didn't need his iPad, he didn't need the technology to say it, but we'd been trying for months to try to get him to ask this question on his own.
Wow.
And we did, and then they introduced another question, and within a couple of days, he was able to then say it by himself without the communication system at all.
All right, well, there you have it, folks.
Okay.
A reason to use these devices, and they're very reinforcing. It's wonderful. Okay, I promised that we were going to talk a little bit about manding. So, to explain for people who are just tuning in and watching for the first time, it's one of our jargon words that we talk about from time to time. But let's hear from you. What exactly is manding?
Okay, so manding is the behavioral term for requesting. Okay, so, or demanding. And with a mand, basically the speaker benefits from it. And so it's a very, very, very important aspect of functional communication. In that when we look at what we learn as far as language goes, whether you're a toddler, you are an individual on the spectrum, if you're a neurotypical individual, child, adult, etc., the things that we learn first are the things that are important to us to fulfill our wants and needs.
That was said so succinctly, because we've always talked about mand, but I have never heard it quite that way before, Sue. So thank you so much. It's one of those things that if we do it, it's going to fulfill our needs. So how do we teach a child how to mand?
So the way that we teach our children how to mand is that basically we teach them, you say it, you get it. Okay. And so, like I was talking about before, you want to make sure, though, that you're focusing on content above length, especially in the beginning.
Okay.
So I know that a lot of people want longer utterances, but I try to always emphasize that you want to go for content over length. And so if you're adding length, you always want to add more information into that. Okay. So for example, if I did apple, and let's say the child has learned to ask for an apple, my next step would be to say like red apple or big apple or piece of apple. And that's because if I'm lengthening my utterance, then my child is communicating more information to me.
Okay. So even saying more apple.
Yes.
Okay.
You could even do that. Yes, absolutely. But the more specific you are, the more you can convey to somebody else. So I actually often use the example that I often use is that I've been going to Italy for the last 4 years and have been learning Italian sporadically. And so, but people always ask me, what are the words that you know? And I'll say the words that I know best are for the things that I've needed to ask for.
There you go.
Because I can go to a restaurant, and even though I might not be able to say it in a full sentence, I can say that I want fizzy water.
Right.
Or that I would like a pizza with pepperoni and arugula. But I'm not going to necessarily say it in a full sentence. I do need to still work on my Italian. So for our kids, the same thing too, though, in that when we work on teaching them, and I'm talking about very, very beginning level communicators.
Yeah.
We want to go with only making them ask for things that they want. That's number one.
Yeah.
So, for example, I had a child that I was working with, and they said, I told them, okay, I told the team, you must get your child requesting at least 60, 75 times an hour. Okay. Because a 2-year-old neurotypical child, will request about 2.3 times a minute.
Wow.
And so because of that, even doing it 60, 75 times an hour is still not quite enough, but we need to start somewhere. But you want to do a large number. But you also only can ask them to ask for things that they want. So you can't say, like, let's say, for example, your child doesn't like to put their clothes on.
Right.
Then you're not going to ask your child to request for the different pieces of clothing.
Right.
Because it has to be positive. It has to be for something that they want.
Are there 60 to 75 things that they want in an hour? What if there aren't?
If there aren't, then what we recommend is that you actually do a lot of one thing. So, for example, if I'm going to do an apple, I'm not actually going to do an entire apple. Because imagine if I did an entire apple and they said apple, when they said apple, I gave them the entire apple. Then I'm pretty much done for a couple hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I can cut up the apple into tiny pieces, then every time they say it, I give them a small piece. Then I could maybe do 10, 15 times with the apple rather than just one.
Okay. What if it's not something that's consumable? What if it's a specific toy that they want that they're requesting?
If it's for a toy, it may be just for one turn on the toy.
Okay.
Like, for example, let's say they want to play with the top. So rather than letting them just keep pushing that top and letting it spin and spin and spin and spin, it may be that they get the top, but they only get to push it once.
Yeah.
Or I spin it once and then they watch it until it stops.
What's striking to me, Sue, is that when you want to be working on manding, you pretty much have to clear the decks for a whole bunch of other things. You got to have a little bit of a plan, because if every time they ask for it, you're going to give it to them, and if you want them to be asking that many times, then you're going to want to put specific toys out. Like I always say, a marble run is one of the best toys there is, because it's something that ends very quickly and that they can request it again.
Yes.
So having that in mind, toys that have, whether it's one of those toys that you put a ball in and then they can ask for another ball, or things like that. But perhaps an action figure toy like a Buzz Lightyear maybe not be the best toy to be working with when you're doing manding, if you're wanting that volume of manding.
Right, right. I mean, and depending on your child too, not all kids are going to stick around and do 10, 15 repetitions of it.
Right.
But the learning will happen much faster if they're exposed to multiple repetitions.
Okay. Okay. And manding has far-reaching effects. And I know one of them is that when a child, I always call it the magic X that you guys get on on your graphs, that when manding goes up, challenging behavior goes down. But it also is a beginning skill for a lot of other things, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Remember too, though, that manding is going to be the most powerful behavior for the child to build to start, because it benefits them. Okay. So when they ask for something, they get it, whether that be vocally, iconically, using a device, that they benefit immediately from doing it.
Yeah.
So that's why it's the most powerful. So oftentimes too, like you're saying, it leads to other things like, for example, tacting.
Yeah.
And tacting, the definition for tacting, it is that it is a comment on things that are occurring, and it involves your senses.
Okay.
So it could be something that you taste, smell, touch, hear, see, etc.
And we're going to talk about tacting in just a minute, but I want to go back to manding for just a second, and because it might sound overwhelming to a parent, this whole idea if you're working on manding and it has to happen 60 to 70 times an hour and you're going to give the thing. But I want to bring up the point that while that might be exhausting, it's a lot less exhausting than dealing with tantrums.
Absolutely.
And that really is the trade-off that you get when you're working on manding, so it's worthwhile to work on. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have Sue talk some more about tacting. Tacting, I think, is one of the hardest things for me to get my head around how to teach it and how to teach it properly. So we're going to talk to Sue about that, but let's take a little break, and we're going to be right back.
Hi, we're here today with Cecilia Knight, who is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And today I'm thrilled to have her here because we're going to talk about manding. What is manding?
Request that you would make of another person.
Why is manding one of the first things that seems to come up in most programs?
Okay. Well, a baby requests for his mother's attention by crying or by reaching. And so it's one of the first ways that you let another person know what you need. And then that other person reinforces you by either picking you up or giving you something to drink or something to eat. And so many of our clients aren't really good at that once we start a program with them. And unfortunately, many of them engage in inappropriate manding, screaming, kicking, biting. And so what we're trying to do early on is no longer reinforce the inappropriate ways of asking and rather reinforce the appropriate ways of asking. And as we teach them an appropriate way to ask for, Mom, play with me, can I have juice, or, even more simply, help, then we see those inappropriate demands decreasing and the appropriate demands increasing, because the child's wants and their desires aren't really changing, but we're teaching them the right way to get their needs met.
So manding doesn't have to actually be spoken. It can be nonverbal as well.
And that's exactly right. They could exchange an icon. And if I bring you an icon with a cup on it and hand it to you, and you bring me a juice cup, then we've made an exchange. And so there is what Skinner would call verbal behavior. You have reinforced my request for a cup or for juice.
So when we say verbal behavior, we're not talking about vocal behavior necessarily.
That's right.
It's just that it's a conversation of some sort.
What is reinforcing to the child? The demand is evoked by the child's desire or their need for something. So early on, we may arrange the situation where I know that they're interested in the juice and they're reaching for it. I may hold it back to just say juice or ja or whatever is appropriate for that child. And then as soon as they emit any sort of response, give a high level of praise and then immediately give them the juice. But what controls the demand is that specific reinforcer. So of course, if the child asks for a juice cup and you bring something else, then they're not being reinforced with what they asked to have.
Okay. What do you want?
Good job.
You say wafer, please. Wafer, please. Good talking. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Daddy.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm having such a good time because we're talking to Soo Cho. Soo has been working with kids on the spectrum now for, did you say 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Yes. And she's a great resource. Of course, if you've been watching the interview, you see exactly why I beg her to come on from time to time. We've been talking about teaching functional communication skills, whether it's with an assisted device, whether we're using an iconic communication system. We're talking about teaching vocal speech as well, teaching manding. I know you had one more thing you wanted to add about the manding, because we said the 65 to 70 number, and I was having a little bit of allergic reaction to it. But tell us what we need to know.
When I'm giving that number out, I'm speaking about maybe in a therapy session. Mm-hmm. And so don't feel that if you can't do that high of a number to start, that you can't be doing it. You may decide that maybe during dinner time or during snack time is when you can focus on working on manding. So don't feel that if you cannot do that high of a number that you won't be able to teach your child. It's just that the more consistency that you have and the more repetition that you have will increase the likelihood that your child will learn it faster.
Okay, great. And we started talking about tacting before we went to break, and you were talking about, and tacting is a difficult thing to understand, but you were saying it's commenting on something in the environment, but it has to do with the senses. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that's correct. And the difference between a tact versus a mand is that when you have a tact, it doesn't benefit the speaker, it benefits the listener.
Great. But it's hard because it's something that's supposed to happen spontaneously. So how do you teach tacting?
Yes. So generally speaking, what we have to do is first we look at how many mands your child has. Mm-hmm. Because if your child doesn't have a relatively large manding repertoire, like 50 different items, mm-hmm. then it's going to make it more difficult for your child to comment about their environment.
Okay, so we got to get that in place first.
Yes. So manding is first and foremost on the agenda.
Okay.
Then after that, we go to tacting. Well, the thing too, like I said, is that your child isn't necessarily going to be reinforced by commenting on their environment. Mm-hmm. And so initially what we'll have to do is we'll have to contrive it. And so there are a number of ways you can do that. The first thing that you can do is, what we often do is that we will ask the child a question or we will contrive the tact so then it's impure. So I might say, what is this? Or point to an item specifically, or hold it up. And in this case, though, when the child says it, they don't get it. Okay? Because if they said it and they got it, they'd be mad.
Okay.
Okay. So then we also need to make sure, too, though, that yes, even though you should have the desire to communicate, you should have the desire to connect and have conversation, etc. The thing is, for a lot of our children, that isn't the case.
Right.
And so you need to heavily reinforce their commenting to you, whether that is when it's contrived or not contrived. So, for example, if I say, what do you see? And the child says, I see a tree. And then, or they say tree, I'm going to give them tickles, I'm going to give them tokens, I'm going to give them bubbles, spins, etc., so that they see the value for doing what they did.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
So we go from manding to tacting, and then we get the interverbals. And I always try to explain interverbals because I think I get it, but I must not, because my explanation is always a mess. So you tell us what an interverbal is.
Okay. So the way that I describe the interverbal is that essentially you can the child in this case is responding to a vocal stimulus.
Okay.
Okay. And in addition to that, they can respond to the vocal stimulus without having any other information. So let me give you an example. So if I said to you, what's your name? And you said, Shannon.
Yeah.
That would be an interverbal in that you would be responding to what's your name.
Okay.
You don't need any other information to answer that question.
Okay.
Okay. But if I said to you, for example, what color is the apple?
And I would
I'm
say,
being very specific.
then
it cannot be an interverbal, because unless you have some type of reference, like an apple, you won't be able to answer that question. That's pretty much how I generally describe the difference between an interverbal and a tact.
Okay. So it's a vocal stimulus and you need no other information in order to answer it.
Yes, exactly.
Is it always a question or not always?
No, it is not always a question. So could it be like, hi?
Okay, and then I would say hi back.
Exactly.
But the main thing is that it is an interaction and it's not just repetitive, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
All right. It does require another person.
Okay. So, and we want to teach interverbals. Why?
We want to teach interverbals because that's pretty much the foundation for things like conversations.
Okay. So the groundwork for conversation. And how do we teach interverbals? Because it's going to be, if it's not something that's in whatever was spoken, then we can't just have them echo. It's going to be hard to prompt them.
Right. Oftentimes what we will often teach in the beginning are things like personal information questions.
Okay.
Like, how are you? Or even greetings. What's your name? What do you like to do? So those are often the foundations to start with.
Okay. And we can prompt them. We can prompt them to do it and then fade the prompt.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Wow. So much to do, but what's amazing to me is how it's all possible. As a parent with a child on the spectrum, when my child lost speech, and I was trying all these different things, and they weren't working, and this is what works. And you've been seeing that for 20 years. So I'm sure for you, it seems like it's a little bit taken for granted, but for the rest of us, it's this amazing and miraculous thing, giving our children language when they didn't come to it instinctively.
And also, too, though, your child doesn't have to have intelligible speech in order to be working on all these levels either.
Okay. So we could still be working on interverbals and tacts with something like an iconic communication system with an augmented device. We could be using those as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Amazing. We're almost out of time, but Sue, the last time you were with us, you gave me some really amazing news, and we got so involved talking that I didn't share it. But you've just gotten a new certification. Tell us what you've been doing.
I am now a certified yoga instructor.
And you told me this, and I was like, that's so great. That is so great for you personally. But I kind of looked at you and said, you're so busy, you travel all over the world. Do you want to be a yoga instructor? And I was amazed by your response. So tell us one of the big benefits of you being a yoga instructor.
I've been really trying to embed aspects of it into some of the children's programs that I work with, where they may have maybe difficulty with stress management, or maybe they have issues with motor skills. And so I've been implementing it into some of the children's programs to help in those areas. And it's actually helped quite a bit. And then I'm also working on teaching yoga to children, so underprivileged children and preschoolers and that type of thing as well. So,
and have you had any time to perhaps share some of what you're learning with the parents and the individual families as well?
I have been able to for some of the children, definitely. Like I have one child who has had quite a bit of difficulty with posture and motor control, and put in a couple of beginning level balancing movements and things, and it's actually helped her with her posture quite a bit.
Sue, I gotta say, you're such an inspiration, because I'm all the time saying to the parents, you know what's amazing? A lot of times we feel like we're so alone on this journey. And then you meet people like Soo Cho, and you chose to be on this journey with us. You don't have a child who's on the spectrum, so you chose to be on this journey with us, and you worked so hard, and you care about these kids so deeply. It's humbling to me. And I want for everybody to see, here's an example of the kind of people you will meet on this journey, people like Sue, who are always thinking of what more can I do to help our kids. It's really amazing, Sue. It helps me to get up every morning to know that there are people like you in the world.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm all verklempt here now. And I love the fact that you are globetrotting, taking care of children and helping parents to learn how to take care of them, and training the army around the world that you're training to help those kids as well. You're an amazing person. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we'll have you back on the show again in the future. And thanks for illuminating all these different things for us.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to say goodbye to Sue. Bye, Sue. We're going to take just a brief break and come back and close out the show, so stick with us.
Hi, I'm here today with Cecilia Knight, who is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And she's going to talk to us about something that I'm not entirely clear on, tacting.
Tacting is when you make a comment on the environment, and then another person may reinforce that with non-specific reinforcement.
Can you explain to me what the difference between a tacting program is and an expressive labeling program?
In an expressive labeling program, typically the therapist holds up a card, maybe with a turkey on it, and the therapist would say, "What is this?" referencing the picture. And the child would respond, "Turkey." The child is labeling the item. With a tact, it's a comment on the environment. So it can be evoked by a smell. So if I walk into the house and I smell Thanksgiving dinner, I can say, turkey. Or if I hear gobble, 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 I can say, that's a turkey. So it's a comment on the environment, which is different than just naming the item.
How do you get a child to comment on the environment? That's got to be hard.
It is. We use different prompts. Most of the time we use vocal prompts. For example, we may look through a book and point to the picture of an item and say, "Oh, look, it's Nemo." Say, "Nemo," and then reinforce the child for responding. Or we may say, "What do you see?" Say, "Nemo." And then eventually we would want to fade our point away. So I may say, "Look, Nemo," and then the child is referencing that and then also saying, "That's right, I see Nemo." And then later fading completely away, so the picture of Nemo itself evokes the comment. If we're working on something auditory, maybe we have a cow on the table and we play the environmental sound in front of them, maybe give them a vocal prompt to say, it's a cow, and the child may say, it's a cow. And then we might fade the visual of the cow and they just hear the sound. And we prompt them by saying, say, it's a cow, or I hear a cow, and then eventually fade until the sound itself evokes the comment. The goal is to get towards spontaneous tacting, where the child can walk around and comment on the novel things in the environment that he hears or sees. And so that's a great way to sort of bridge to that point. Tacting is really important to get to higher level lessons of interverbal behavior. Commenting on things that are private events, or commenting on things that I can't see that you're feeling, like your stomach hurts. But it's important to have those tacts in place so you can get to those later programs.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We just finished an interview with Soo Cho, and I get so excited sometimes when we have these people on and you guys get to see the kind of people that I get exposed to on a daily basis, and you see how much they care about our kids. I think more than anything else, that's what I want you to know, is that there is constantly a team of people who are working, trying to find solutions. I understand that sometimes the solutions aren't trickling down to you as fast as I would like them to, or as fast as your child needs them. But I want you to know people are working on that. And if there are things that you need that aren't trickling down fast enough, please write in and say, here's what I need more of, whether it's a tip on how do I get funding, or a tip on how do I fill out that paperwork for that grant, whatever it is. I'm always asking you guys, what is stopping you from being able to access ABA so that you can teach your child these important skills? We just had Sue go through all of these different things that can help our children to acquire functional communication skills and ultimately language, to be able to tell us what they need, what they want, what their hopes and their dreams are, right? I don't know anybody who works in any capacity with a child on the autism spectrum that doesn't want that for their child, their student, their client. And we do know that these techniques that she was talking about are effective, that they work, that progress can be made. So tell me what's preventing you from getting there, because that's what I want to work on. And lots of different ways that you can talk to us. Always, 24 hours a day, you can email us, you can phone us. We appreciate you writing in on Facebook. We appreciate you tweeting us, all these different ways. Also want to remind you, you can be watching the shows in other formats, that you can be watching us on Blip TV, you can be watching us on YouTube, you can be downloading us on iTunes, all these different ways. And if there are more ways that you need that we're not presenting to you, please write and tell us. If there's a service that we could be on, it's important to us that we remain free, because this is important information, and the people that I work with on a daily basis know how important it is to not add one more thing to your pile. We have to get this information out, because we can be more effective. We can be more efficient working with our kids. I know this, and I get to enjoy the benefits of these kinds of lessons with my son now, who went from having no functional communication skills to now talking my leg off. It's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing, and I want that for you as well. So stick with us on a daily basis. Tomorrow, two things I want to mention. At 10:30 tomorrow Pacific Standard Time, we're going to have Joe Hill, a parent who has created an app that's making lots of headway that I want you to know about. He's going to be with us at 10:30 tomorrow, and then at 11 o'clock, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox is going to be with us talking about research. You're not going to want to miss that. We'll be back at 9 o'clock. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.